Dun, 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 dun,
Oh,
dun,
hello, hello.
dun, 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 dun. Okay, right. Hi.
Well,
Good morning for
well,
me. Good evening for you.
welcome to another
Yeah,
Humpday Q&A.
that's
Let's
one of those
let's
again. It's like the middle of the week. It's a good time to do one of the hump day things because it's the middle of the week. That's kind of where the name comes from. Just in case any of you were ever curious, I'm
yeah,
sure you're just
and
tuning in.
just for the people that it's your first time here, this comes up every Wednesday, same time, same place here on YouTube. So yeah, come join us.
Yep.
Um,
And it's available forever in the YouTube archives.
oh
And
no, that's it.
many of
You get it.
you, I know some of our sayings are now
I'm,
permanently there
I'm,
on our
I'm
permanent
gonna be
record.
I'm permanently this young now. This is the way it goes, right? On the internet,
Oh,
like
you would hope. You
this
would
is
hope.
immortalized forever. Anyway.
It's like the icon I use for everything now was a quick selfie on a cruise ship when I was dressed in a suit, which is so rare. And that's the bathroom curtain, shower curtain behind me. And
That's it.
and that and that's now my permanent avatar everywhere, and it's 10
We know
years
your
old.
secret. We know your secret. All right.
Hey,
Let's
I tell all my secrets on this show. It's crazy that way. Why don't we introduce ourselves and so we can talk about the beginning of the show here?
let's do the do's and don'ts quickly, and then we can jump into
Oh,
introducing ourselves. Right. Go for it.
sure.
Randall,
Sorry, I forgot the order already. Look at
the
that.
stage is yours.
Oh, okay. So do's and don'ts. So be nice, be respectful, be constructive. We're all working together for common goals here. So everybody, please help everybody else move forward. Don't post anything, especially if it's adult content or rude or offensive. We do have magic buttons here that we can push to make you go away. So don't do that, and otherwise you'll be going away. Do not advertise or promote anything. The only people that can advertise or promote anything are us. Everybody you see on the screen, nobody else, nobody in the chat, nobody can advertise stuff. We get to advertise stuff. Don't spam. If you post the same thing again and again, the magic button comes out and you go away. Also, if you post a question, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then you post the same question 20 minutes later, you lost your place in the queue. Too bad. So don't post the same question twice. It's silly. We've seen them. We see every one of them. We see all. So you don't need to post it multiple times.
Randall sees all.
Sorry, what?
Randall sees all.
I see all. It's true. I'm looking on all these screens all over the place, which my gaze is never straight ahead. And harassment of any kind, again, also not tolerated. Again, magic button will come out, and it's not very fun for you when that happens. But amongst everything else, have a good time. We're having a good time here. That's part of why we do this every week, is to have fun. And so please enjoy it along with us. So I think that covers them there, Simon.
I think that covers it. We'll do a quick brief introduction. We'll get our guests on.
Yep.
My name is Simon Lightfoot, Flutter Community Leader and CTO at Dev Angels London. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dev Angels London. Scott Carby with us today. He's going to be around next time. Randall, introduce yourself, please.
Randall Schwartz. I am a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert, which means I'm one of the 10 people in the United States that Google seems to have entrusted with this title. And what that means I do is I spend a lot of time answering y'all's questions in various places like Discord and Reddit and the Slacks and stuff like that. So I am everywhere. You can pretty much any community place, I'm probably there answering your questions at some point or another. I also have a day job. I'm, mostly full-time now, talking to various people, helping them along with their projects. So I have office hours now. I actually have a way you can schedule my office hours, but I'll just mention that a little later in the show. But for this show, I am also the question magician, which means that for the live call, the live part of the call, there is a live chat on YouTube. And I'm watching for when people put Q: in front of a message. Those are questions to us. When I see Q:, I mark it off. It goes in our queue. There's the bad pun every week. And we will answer them in the order received. So if you don't hear yours for a while, sometimes we get a pretty long queue. So just bear with us on that. We will get to everybody's question that asks their question within the time limits that we set. So I think that answers everything about me.
And we do have some Flutter community members with us this week, so I'm going to introduce them to the stage. Danielle, welcome.
Hey there. Last week Randall told me I was a regular, but so not just a guest anymore. But anyway,
and
because I guess you were gone on some train somewhere, so I guess he felt the authority, so he could jump in.
Field promotion.
Yeah.
She got a field promotion. So there we go.
Hi everybody, I'm Danielle, and I'm a Flutter developer. I lead a small team of Flutter developers at a startup here in the U.S. I'm also one of the organizers of the Flutteristas. So if you are female and or non-binary, and you have an interest in Flutter, you should reach out to me, and I'll get you set up with this. And we have we have our own little Slack that we get together with, and it's a more focused group for those of us that are female and non-binary. And anyway, that's me.
And we have another guest with us. Thank you.
Yes.
And Swav, welcome to the chat.
Yeah, I'm also Flutter GDE. What a surprise, right?
Huge call for the same price, 2 for 1.
Right. I'm going to be, by the way, sometime. I'm putting it out there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm a Flutter GDE. Looking at a Flutter and playing with Flutter since the beginning of Flutter, and that's a lot of things I love about Flutter. So you're gonna see me a lot.
Were you the first Flutter Dart GDE?
So we need to settle this with Randall, who's first, because I think I'm the first. I've checked the dates.
I never say I'm the first. I only say that I was a web GDE for 6 months because they hadn't invented the term Flutter GDE yet. So I'm in the first batch.
I essentially can go and check essentially dates when we were enlisted.
I want to see dates. I only see those things.
I don't remember. It was a while ago.
Anyway, it's so long.
More than a year
ago. I
ago.
don't remember when it happened. Like seriously.
Yeah, it just happens. It's one of those crazy things in your life. You just get the email and go, here, join this mailing list. It's like, okay, it must be me then. I must have made it. I'm on a private mailing list now. Yeah.
So before we get going, I want to just let people know about some upcoming things if they don't know. So for those that don't know, we just had FlutterCon. It was a rousing success, and I think let's see if I can get the Flickr photo album open here. The one time that I can't find it. One second. Let's see if I can get it. So we get this up on the stream. What is that? That looks about big enough, doesn't it? There you go. Yeah. So we had this very fun event. Can we get that multiple pictures on there? There you go. Cool. So this was just huge. I'm sure there'll be quite a few faces that people recognize if they go through. I'll post this link in the chat for those that actually want to. Page 2. Teeny tiny. But look, I know who that is. That's Taha.
Yeah. My face doesn't show up much, but my hair is quite a bit in there.
You see the purple around something, do you?
Yeah.
Bunch of great people, and it was such a great time. The rooms were packed as well. That was really great. So a lot of the rooms were filled up with a lot of people. So yeah. Look, we know who that is.
Oh yeah, that's a cool picture.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like he's trying to be like some hawk or something.
DJ.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a great moment
DJ.
in time.
It's a gang sign. That's a gang sign.
Yeah, we had Pujic came by.
Oh god, there's just so many.
Yeah.
Oh look, there's Mark. That's
Mark,
nice,
yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, he actually showed
Anyway.
up at a Flutter conference to give a talk on Angular.
Todd.
Wow.
Yeah.
Greg has been an amazing organizer. This is his speech at the very beginning. It's been so great to get things going. But anyway, you'll find that here. I'll post the link to the album in the chat, so if anyone wants to go look, see if they can find their photo if you came. Thank you very much. But talking about events, we have just coming up, Flutter and Friends in Stockholm, and that's on the 3rd to the 5th of September. So that's coming up soon. So if you couldn't make it to FlutterCon, there's Flutter and Friends in Stockholm in Sweden. So there's that, and already a huge set of names and faces and talks for you to check out. So I'll make sure
Lots
that
of
link
Vikings
is
I can see, yeah.
in the chat as well. And then finally, I'm wearing this headband for a reason. There's Flutter Firebase Festival F3, and that's from 26th to 27th in Prague in Czech.
Nice.
So again, if you're interested, then register yourself. Speakers soon to be announced, but it's coming up very soon, and this is going to be awesome. So that's F3.events for Flutter Firebase Festival, or F3, as you see, and flutterfriends.dev for Flutter.
Is Philip gonna be there?
I cannot
Because he
deny
is from Prague, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I cannot deny or attest to any speakers right this minute.
Yeah.
Anyway, So come learn about Firebase and Flutter, and more.
Right.
Not just that. Right.
I hope to be at some of those, but I'm grounded for at least another 6 months. But I now have my hip replacement surgery scheduled, so I'm on the 2 months before that, getting everything prepared for that. And then I can finally start flying again. I can finally start going places. I feel so weird to be grounded.
You've got to flap really hard, and you'll start flying.
I'm getting flappings happening soon.
Get your landing.
So,
Make
Get
his
ready.
air miles, yes.
I hope to see you all in person in a number of upcoming
indeed.
events.
Definitely FlutterCon next year, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we haven't met in person, have we, Randall?
I don't think we have. No.
Yeah.
It sometimes feels like it with all the time I've spent with you here on screen, but
of course.
no,
But
I think so.
we need to fix that sometime.
Me and Danielle met the first time in person at FlutterCon, and I'm like, didn't seem strange because like
that's not true.
Was it
not true at all?
It was good.
No, this is the third time they've met, right?
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, maybe Flutter Interact.
Flutter Interact. And
Was that the first time?
No,
it was another one.
Maybe it was. I don't know. Were you at IO 19?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Wow. See, this is how great my memory is right now.
Yeah. Now I feel good now.
Put me to
Don't
shame.
remind him.
By the way, Simon, we're doing a show today. I don't know if you remember that on Wednesday.
Are we live? Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. We're live. Going out to a huge number of people. If you write it in a giant font.
Let's see.
Do we
have some questions in the chat?
Just a few.
Shall we?
Not a lot yet. So please put your questions in now and they'll get answered quickly. If you wait until halfway through the show, you might not get in. So please put your questions in.
And I think we said last week, I'll do a bit of live coding. I think we'll try and do some like slivery, scrolly things and see what we can fit around with. Maybe have some fun. And that'll be the latter half of the show. So get your questions in now. And if you're interested in slivers or you have anything around slivers you want to know about, get those questions in and we'll get them at the end and maybe do some code samples of them as well. So
very important to call them slivers and not silvers.
Yeah,
they're not silvers.
And if you have any questions you want me to answer, I've got a hard stop at the top of the hour. So get those in now.
Okay.
I'm talking about while we're here. That is an awesome Pac-Man machine behind you. And for those that don't know, I actually wrote. It's a real one. I, on the other hand, made an emulator. So this is a Pac-Man emulator, which you can go. This emulates the full original CPU.
Wow.
And ow, that's really loud in my ears.
Only 4 credits. You'll never get done. Look at that. Wow.
I can't even remember my own buttons. Hang on a minute. There's a mute button, but I can't remember what it is. I thought I did a mute button.
We're not
anyway,
hearing it anyway. We're
well,
not
you won't
hearing
be
it.
able to hear it.
Yeah, but he is.
If anyone, yeah, I can't hear anyone else while it's playing, so I won't play it. But if anyone wants to have a go, I'll put the link in the chat there.
Cool.
But that's written in Flutter, and I think I can find the source code for you and get that out there as well.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Who knew? Who knew that if you could control every pixel on the screen, you'd actually be able to do that?
Yeah, who would have thunk it? Oh yeah, it's public. Yeah, I thought it was public, but I didn't know. And so I'll pop that link in the chat for those. I mean, should we just fill up some time here? Yes. So if we go, this is old. I mean, when did I make this? 2 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, you'll find inside the lib directory, you'll find the emulator, and I do some stuff. Sound on web and Windows, I think works. I didn't do it on Mac. So there's a bit around that, and then the actual running the display, which actually runs output video frames, like kind of fun stuff. If you're interested, you can go and look at this. But I think the real magic happens in emulator, and this. So I wrote a package called Z80, which you can go find, which is a Z80. It's a port of a Z80 CPU emulator, and then this is the original.
Does it mean we can build Spectrum from this as well?
Yes, and in fact, someone may have already been writing a Spectrum emulator that actually what I've seen working. I cannot deny who this is right now because it's up to them to release it. But I hope they will release it because it is awesome. But yeah, so this is a bunch of the memory addresses that are used for various things, as explained here. I won't go into the details. However, this is an arcade machine emulator based on the Z80 here, and this essentially loads all the original ROMs, sets up a bunch of stuff, and then I actually decode the original palettes. So these are these are the original values of the resistors. This basically recalculates the color palette based on the original hardware, decodes the video ROM output. This is what the little chip on the board would do, and then renders the video. Essentially, renders a bitmap image. And eventually,
very good documentation for the the device itself, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Anyway, render character, render sprite, and then finally, I think somewhere down here, on the output buffer itself, where it writes the pixels, it actually converts that to does the decode bitmap, decode image from bitmap or whatever it is inside Flutter. And then we also do the same thing. This merges all the original waveforms together and essentially renders the sound effects out to a buffer. And then this bit down here is all about just reading and writing the memory addresses and something for the CPU. So that's the entire thing. 444 lines. There's Pac-Man.
And this is all in Dart. Dart is fast enough to do a full emulation of
it emulates the full thing.
Sitting behind her. Wow.
Actually, probably you need to slow it down, the clock to.
It is actually, yes. So there's plenty enough headroom in the clock to do everything. So this actually runs at where is it? 3 megahertz.
Oh wow.
And basically the way I work this is number of CPU cycles per frame it has to run. So based on the ticker that we get from Flutter, this then says, okay, I'm going to run this many CPU cycles, and it counts from when there's a bit down here. Hang on, if I can find it. Why not? You've asked now, it's your fault. There you go. So here's where it actually runs. So this is each tick of graphics. If it's not paused, it does runs the interrupts if they're ready, and then it adds this cycle count. And whilst we have cycles, it runs those instructions. And this kind of cycle counts and keeps track, and so that based on the frame rate that the machine runs just as quick. So you're going to get the correct number of CPU instructions per frame being run, basically.
A software emulator.
Just to give you context,
a hardware emulator.
That 80 processor could address 64 kilobytes of memory.
Yeah,
Let's say
in fact,
the whole game
if,
had to actually fit in it,
well,
plus ROM, plus frame buffer for actually showing the display. So,
oh yeah, in fact, that's what I do up here. You'll see, where is it? Is it up here? That's sure. Oh no, it might be in the actual top end.
Wow.
Yeah, there it is. There's your RAM, 64K in an array. Bomb done.
yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
Now try to compile any program which we're gonna have below 64 kilobytes and run.
I mean, it's just amazing what you can get done in that sort of size. Anyway, and then here you can see, for example, people are always asking this stuff, and I mentioned it now. Like here, like on key down, if you press the space, then we toggle off a bit in this register, in input 0 register, for the coin and start and so on. So each different bit of memory controls if a button's impressed. Now, originally, this memory address that this points to is mapped by the CPU to actually buttons. Right, so there's actually the circuit themselves. When you push the button, it pulls it down to ground, which registers 0 when the CPU reads that register. So this is basically emulating what would take place if you pushed and lift up the buttons. And then I also added some cheats in there so that you can like give yourselves an extra life at any time and end the level. This allows you to like end the level at any time. So if you can't be bothered completing it, you can go up to the next harder difficulty and so on.
That's what
it's also
kids
great to
in
see
my
the
town
cuts.
were doing, is actually doing the infinite life in the game. That was hacking right now. It's not, you didn't have to hack the game to have it. You just had to have a tape recorder to copy it. Let's say, but if you want to be a hacker, you have to hack your eternal life in your game. So essentially, you need to find this place when there's one register is decreased by 1 and make it doesn't happen, and then you have an infinite life in your game.
So that there's actually like I think if I remember rightly, there's an app that you can get called like I think don't ever try this because it'll probably get you banned on like these new apps, right? Because there's cheat detection, right? But I remember one called Cheat Engine, and basically what it would do is you run the game and it would start debugger up against the process. It would go through the memory, make basically a snapshot of the memory. Then you run the game some more, you lose a life, and then you tell it I went from 5 to 4 lives, and then it scans and it sees what value went from 5 to 4 and what memory address. And you keep doing it, and it learns basically after so many iterations. You go, oh, this exact memory address is where the lives counter is stored, and if I on every tick keep that at 255, I always stay at 255 lives.
Right.
So just the debugger actually resets the memory address every single 100 milliseconds or whatever. Now you've got infinite lives.
Yep. My brother Ron, hi Ron, was worked at a Chuck E. Cheese and was really, really excellent at video games, and he scored the world record high score for Defender. They got held for about 2 weeks, and then somebody else beat him. But one of the things he learned is that the Defender number of lives rolls over in 1 bite. So he would get way up there, and then it would just go to 0 and go, he'd play like crazy for a while to try to get it back away from 0. So he just learned to basically throw away a bunch of lives when it got to 100 or so, and then he was fine. Yeah.
There was a game. What was the game? It's going to bug the hell out of me. There's an old arcade game like the ones that are behind Danielle there, which is on a vector screen. You go down a tunnel. You move the ship around the outside edge.
Tempest?
Break something.
No, you've got Danielle. So what did you say, Danielle?
Tempest.
Tempest.
You're
Tempest.
shooting on tunnel, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So on Tempest, if I remember rightly, if you lose your life on when the score is a certain value, it bugs out and gives you an extra life, like more lives or something, like an extra 10 lives. So there was like this place. Basically, if your score was over a certain value, like over 1 million, and it ends in like an 8, you get like 4 extra lives if you died.
Wow.
So it was a way of it was the way to kind of get further in the game, because there's no way you could complete the game with just the lives they give you, kind of thing.
Well, like Galaga's got a certain like Easter egg kind of thing where if you do things a certain way, it ends up where they never fire again.
So does anyone know the Pac-Man one? When you want to break on Pac-Man, you have to direct Pac-Man into there's a bottom corner. If you direct it in the character in a certain direction and hold in that direction, the ghost never finds you.
Yeah.
So when they have these tournaments, right, of Pac-Man tournaments where they're trying to get they have to maybe take a break or something or drink, because you can't stop the character, right? Like otherwise you get eaten by the ghost. So they literally use this little hack in the game to have a break or something,
Well, for the record, back in the day, my high score on Pac-Man was 3,190,000.
Wow.
And I had to be getting close to the kill screen, but I wasn't there yet. And I had a job at a skating rink, and I was like playing this game at a Circle K by my house, and my mom comes in and she's just so mad at me because I'm going to be late to my job. I have a job, but I'm late to it because I'm playing Pac-Man, and she actually makes me leave the game with 3,190,000 score.
It's interesting. You mentioned
I wasn't scoring that much, but I was hacking games and usually finding the way to when your life is essentially deducted is to find this moment where there's a black screen. And usually how you get a black screen on Spectrum is to load 0 in the first memory byte of the screen buffer, and then use the LDER Z80 command, which copies the part of memory to another part of memory by copying the screen buffer to screen buffer +1. So it takes this 1 byte and just populates it very quickly. So everyone was looking for essentially this specific part of the code in a game when essentially screen goes back. And there was one game which was actually they bloody hell, they put a stack pointer on the end of the screen and then started to load zeros in. And it was like, took us half a year to figure out that where it was. But we found it, Finny. Yeah.
Well, we have 10 questions in the queue, so we probably could get to that.
Let's do some
wonderful distraction, wonderful history meeting. Yes, right.
All right.
Robotron 2084. Robotron.
Oh yeah, Robotron is awesome as well.
The Zen game. You have to really just get into the Zen of it.
Yeah. You had to get. Was it Robotron? Yeah, that had the two joysticks, right?
Yeah.
One for move, one for fire. Yeah, that was
move and fire, right? And you could sweep.
Yeah.
Oh,
that is awesome. Anyway, right, come on. Let's move on. Do you know if FlutterCon presentation will be online for people who couldn't attend in person to Mytho? Thank you. Yes, they will be online. They have all been recorded and they will be published. When? That's another matter. And they've been edited right now, and it is soon TM, right? So I'm hoping within the next 2-3 weeks, basically. So I'll keep you posted.
Have we decided yet where they're going to be published? Because I know there's some discussion on that.
They will be on YouTube. We're on YouTube. Just follow the follow the official FlutterCon EU Twitter account. That's great. Also follow us on this, and I'll post. If you follow this channel, I'll post a community post with the links in wherever they are.
And as a writer,
maybe, but we'll see.
As a writer, I've got to point out unnecessary condition in that statement. The FlutterCon presentation will be available online for everybody, not just the people who couldn't attend in person.
It's a good point.
You don't need that extra condition at the end. Doesn't make sense. That's like a waitress telling me, if you need anything else, my name is Sarah. And then I go, well, what is her name if I don't need anything else?
That reminds me of those. I've seen
unnecessary condition.
I've seen some of those like YouTube shorts where it's like as a programmer and there's like, if they have 2 oranges, go get a loaf of bread or something when you're out shopping or something, and they come back with like 1 orange. Is like, wait, I said get a loaf of bread, but they had a loaf of bread, so I got 2 oranges.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on.
Yes.
Next question.
Okay.
Go for it.
Oh, do you want me to read those? This is my job now. My virtual Scott. I have to do all this work that Scott does now. Okay. I have the following scenario. Imagine I have a list of text widgets, and every time I scroll down, I want two widgets on the top. I want maybe two TWO2 widgets on the top, which are not in the viewport anymore, to be removed. How can I do that? Is that part of the sliver talk coming up?
I'm not even getting what the question is to it. Imagine having a list of text widgets, and every time I scroll down,
Is essentially a recycled view, but it's natively in Flutter happening, isn't it?
I'm not sure. Maybe Lucas, you can express what you're trying to achieve, not the details of what they are, like text widgets and so on. Like, are you just trying to have like a widget stick to the top? Are you just saying how do I recycle widgets and how do I remove them from the viewport? What exactly are you asking here? I think that'd be my key question.
Yeah.
Come back to us, and we'll get to that. Let's we'll move on to the next one for now.
Right. Is the Flutter canvas and canvas kit the same thing? Ooh. Sounds like that's a Danielle answer. You're shaking your head. You must know. Sorry, you moved your head. I thought you knew.
I do know, but do I know well enough to explain? No. Canvas kit for the renderers, right? For web.
Right.
And so Canvas kit's a way that a web page gets rendered, correct? And Canvas itself is a class for what?
Drawing.
For recording? It's for recording, right?
No, for drawing.
Well,
Canvas.
Flutter Canvas has its own protocol, and that's unrelated to Canvas Kit. Canvas Kit is essentially made by the Skier team, and idea is it's a renderer that can render to a web canvas.
Right.
And both those two canvases, they're called canvases because that's a generic term for a surface you can paint to, i.e., like a real painter can paint to a canvas. But they are two separate. They have two different, completely separate interfaces, separate things. And then essentially Flutter Web, what it's doing is building your Flutter code to compile against Canvas Kit so it can render to a web canvas instead of to Flutter Canvas, which would be
how Flutter Canvas comes from Android. The API is very similar. So you have paths, circles, ovals, lines, filled or outlines and stuff like that. So if you defining the custom painter widgets, it's going to be using Canvas. You'll be implementing, say, what is drawn on the canvas.
Right. And Canvas would be available on any platform. So Canvas is something you'd use when you're compiling your web app. You would say, I want to use Canvas Kit, which is the default.
Oh, that's it. I think that's a different canvas.
That's Canvas Kit.
Really? Okay. Yeah. I haven't played with a Canvas Kit. I play with a Canvas a lot in my widgets.
Yeah, the Canvas is the class that work everywhere. Yeah.
So
yeah.
And so this is by default. This is what you get when you create a web app.
Yeah.
It's Canvas.
So this features WebGL encapsulation, core Skier, Canvas Paint Path text APIs available. See the bindings, draws the hardware secondary backend, uses fuzzers, blah blah blah. And here it is. This is Canvas Kit rendering all this stuff, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the normal Flutter canvas is just draw paths, point, circles, or arcs.
There's going to be a very similar API to both of them, right? But I think the difference here is Canvas Kit was built by Skier for the web, and it's a separate project to Flutter Canvas, right?
Right.
One layer of abstraction away.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next.
Okay. When I make a class of textiles that should be called like textile title, should I make all those functions all static or create factory methods? Oh, here's one of these architecture questions. Fun.
I mean,
whatever works.
How about static factory methods?
So, okay, so I'm going to give you a question, Lucas. How are you going to run your tests if you have a static methods and you initialize them once and you want to change them in another test? That's why I don't like static things and global things.
I mean, to be honest, whatever makes sense for what you're doing. I mean, again, like if you're just testing, let's say these are static methods that just returns textile. So basically, I'll give an example of what I can assume you're making is like a class that contains a title function that you give it a color parameter, and therefore you can return back a textile of the title size and font style, but with a different color. And then you'd call that a factory method. And then you can make that static, so you can call it anywhere in your app. And then you could also test it by, again, putting different colors into it and making sure the output text style has that color on the right parameters, right? That all works fine. I mean, to be honest, whatever works. I mean, the end of the day is, if you make something static and access it statically, you have no encapsulation, and that's the real problem with statics, right? So there's no context, you lose scope, right? Static is global scope always, right? So if you instead had a just methods, right? There could be factory methods in a class called text styles that you then use provider or something else, or theme extensions, whatever you want, to provide it down your tree to your app, and then just have like a function that gets it from the context. Now what you can do is you can override that behavior on a subtree. You can easily test that behavior. You can surround it. You can inject. You can essentially dependency injection. And you can do all these other fun things that you can do to actually take control of it. It also means that at some point in the future, if you want to change that behavior, we've got one interface that you're changing. You're not having to change all the places where you call a static method across your application potentially, right?
I'm also curious, are you creating something that is sidestepping the theming mechanism when you're doing this? Because if you're inventing the very same kinds of things that are already in theme, if you have all your own special widgets that do all your own special stuff, then if you accidentally then use a normal widget that's using the normal themes for those styles, you're going to get messed up. I would say first and foremost, be familiar with the core theme slots. Make sure you know what those are and see if you can use them and set them to your desired state. Then you've got all the built-in mechanisms for all the built-in widgets, and you can use those same settings for your widgets in case somebody else wants to customize on top of your stuff. So try to work within the theme. Now, having said that, there's this wonderful thing that rolled out. Was that Flutter 3.7 that it rolled out in the theme extension stuff?
Yes.
Maybe even earlier. Was it 3.7?
I don't know what. I think it might be 3.3. Either way.
3.3. Anyway, so relatively recently, and that allows you to then bolt on the side extra columns for the themes and gets handled the same way. So, but first, look at what is available already in themes. There is something like 150 settings in there. I'm probably off by an order of magnitude. No, can't be off by order of magnitude unless it's 1,500. but no, there are quite a few settings for textiles, for colors, for behaviors. All sorts of things are all in there. So try to work within that system first.
And the reasons they are there is because very often you have a situation when your app will be running on a device you haven't predicted, which has some, different colors, different sizes. Someone needs a bigger font because they are, visually impaired, and they need to set it, and suddenly your styles actually collapse because you haven't predicted this. And the styles which are in Flutter, they are for the reason there. So the people, if they essentially want to have a large fonts on their phones, they have it because they need it, because otherwise they cannot use the font at all.
And I want to kind of echo a little bit of what Randall said, is make sure you understand what's already there before you go trying to figure stuff out, because the worst thing that happens is you duplicate what's already there, or that's the best thing that happens. The worst thing that happens if you go do it on your own is you haven't taken into account stuff that a lot of really smart people have figured out already. And so you start heading down a bad path. It makes it harder when you go find your next job. If you don't understand why things are done normally and you're doing them on your own, then it makes it harder to go, when you go on that interview, you can say, well, I do it this way. And they're going to say, why? Well, that's because that's what I was told to do, or whatever, or that's what I figured out, or things like that. So I want to say that for one thing. The other thing, though, I want to say is the fact that a lot of the stuff I've working with, we've got designers that are they're not Flutter people. I'm not even positive they're mobile app people kind of, stuff. So my theming is not done in a material kind of way. So I don't have headlines and titles and things like that. And so I do have a need for something sort of like what you're talking about here. And depending on what's going on, there's a couple of things I will do. One is, if it was just title, I'd probably make it a getter. If it was just a style that's going to return a style, there's no need. I would probably make it a getter because I think it reads better than having that. But what I would really probably do,
I think he probably has a parameter, right? If he's got parameter, it can't be a getter.
Right. And so what I would actually really do is I would make it like a sort of like a copy with that has the defaults for whatever that style is, and takes all the parameters you want to change. And so it really is like a factory kind of method, but it's also kind of a meld between what you want to have and a copy with. So you can pass in color or change the size or whatever it is you want to change. You just change the parameters you want, and you end up with whatever your title is, your title style, plus whatever changes you make. And so that's probably what I would end up doing. So if I'm allowing you to make changes, I would do a factory, and I would probably take a look at copy with, and put anything you might want to be able to change in there on for these methods, and that way, it works pretty well there. And otherwise, I would make it like a getter if it's very static.
And I would definitely look into the source code actually of theming to actually see what is in there, what can be achieved, because if you may find out that actually what you want to achieve is absolutely not covered there for whatever reason, let's assume that that's the case, but you will find very good ideas how to organize things in a way that other people will understand when they see your code, and actually, you want to achieve something else, but there are good patterns there to actually to see. So inspect the SDK and actually see the code inside.
I mean, if you go look at text theme, which is in a class of theme, you'll find like how it does that. And you can actually do the same thing with theme extensions. You can actually make a theme extension with all your text styles, header large, header small, header medium, whatever you want to call these things. And you can just use them throughout your application. You're just doing a theme extension of class this, header size, rather than using these static sort of functions or factory methods. And then you've kind of you can generate them that way at the top. That would be kind of pushing it down your tree. Anyway, right, let's move on to another question. What's next?
Why review the RiverPod brick that I shared over Discord to you? I imagine he's talking to me, by Simon. I don't remember where that is. So, and why would you reviewing a RiverPod brick? You're not a RiverPod expert, so it'd be me reviewing it. And I don't remember where your brick is. I'm sorry. So, and you can't get the URL here either. So give me something to search for. I'll go find it.
Send it in Discord again, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, you can ping me in Discord too, because I'm sure I'm over there. All right. So, as a Flutter developer with 1.5 years of experience, precisely to the day. Okay. I didn't say 1.50. Okay, right. How should I start with native Android development? Well, goodbye. No, I mean, okay. What should I go with? Java, Kotlin, and XML or Jetpack Compose for UI? That sounds like so many 3-letter and 4-letter.
The problem you've got here is all of the above, really.
Yeah.
Java is on its way out. Kotlin is definitely, I'd say, go first. You should still understand Java and the practices of Java anyway, at least the syntax of the language. So I'd recommend you download some maybe open source projects written in Java and kind of have a play around with them.
Yeah.
XML,
for UI, the Jetpack, fine, but you use XML for resources, for manifest files, permissions, and other things. So definitely understanding XML, the namespaces, adding tools to the manifest to be able to inspect stuff when they essentially are not compiled there.
And you for sure want to be able to read a layout in XML.
Yeah. So as I said, you still have to learn Java and XML, but they are like the alternative for Kotlin and Jetpack Compose. So you're still going to have to know them, but I would treat Kotlin and Jetpack Compose as your go-to first thing to look at for sure. But talking about all of this, the whole idea of Android development, there's a whole set of guides and materials around doing mobile development, how resource system works on Android. All of these things can be found on the Android website in the reference section, and that's what you should be going to looking at. Like understanding the Android platform is more important than understanding Kotlin, XML, Jetpack Compose, right? Understanding what Android is, how an Android app is built up out of bits, how that all
works.
A system, that is more important. Understand what an activity is, what is a service, how those components relate to
what is the broadcast intent, how you return from one activity, what are multiple activities. In Flutter, you run one activity all the time. In Android, you may have it's like juggling, essentially. You have one activity active and all others are essentially in the air, and you just jump between them. So you're switching this context. So in Flutter, like everything can be available from the essentially root scope. You go to your inherited widget on the beginning of your app, on the root on your app, and you get everything from it. In Android, hey, it doesn't exist now because it was system who removed it, and it's going to bring it back when you go back to this activity. So understanding the system as operating system is much more important than actually is it Java or Kotlin. Kotlin is the same nicer Java. Jetpack Compose is essentially how to write the Flutter-like UI, which we're going to run on these canvas they have, and that's it. And XML, you're going to need to essentially put manifest, permissions, resources. So like all the strings are defined in XML in Android, right?
For those that don't know, we're talking about developer.android.com. Also, you can type d.android.com, and you've got essentials here. I've not even looked at this for a long time. Training courses, materials, Kotlin for Android. There's a bunch of, looks like there's a bunch of stuff in here now. Jetpack Compose and libraries. But yeah, they're just the development docs here, like, what is Android best practice for performance dependent. I would only just start taking up core developer topics this week. Start taking a look through some of these things. How does touch and input work on Android, right? Try the Compose.
And as a suggestion, it's good if you try to do it from like one source, like perfectly from their website, because you will find a lot of historical tutorials.
Yeah.
Because you will have, like, let's say, I don't know how many action, top action bars are in Android right now, but there were plenty of them. Same with camera APIs, and you may essentially learn something which is already deprecated because the course is not adequate to what is out there right now. So
as you can see,
it's good if you essentially start here and make your essentially bearing. Yeah.
Well, you can see here they already giving you Kotlin as an examples, right? So Kotlin seems to be the first choice right now. So that's what I would look. Just read the examples, try the tutorial courses, understand all the different things, and start reading the documentation. And I think I said this before about reading technical documentation. Sorry, Danielle. But reading technical documentation, you're going to be confused at the very beginning. You're not going to understand what's an activity. Like, I've never heard of this thing before. Like, they're going to explain all these terms, and the more you read the documentation, the more you can link those terms together and understand the context and go, oh, so an activity is this, a stack is that, a service is this, and you can start, reading up about those things. Like if you type activity in the search box on the developer site, you're going to get a good explanation about what it is.
Providers.
Yeah.
Widgets.
Other types of providers. Content providers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Views, not widgets, right? Widgets is a separate thing on Android.
Yeah. Widgets is what you see on the main home screen, which can connect to your app. And it's outside of the context of your app. It's like a separate, completely app. You're just using some kind of remote call kind of stuff with it to talk to it. So to do this stuff, you need to understand how the system operates. Underlying Linux and communication between different parts, what the intents are and everything. So it will be a challenging thing, and it will gonna take you some time to break your head and figure out, okay, this is, and you stop thinking Flutter, you start thinking Android. Every one of us had to do opposite thing. We had to stop thinking Android and start thinking Flutter. So good luck on the journey.
Yeah.
I want to point out something that Suave said that's I think it's true in Android because of the longevity of Android. It's also true in Flutter, and since we are a Flutter show, I think I'd bring up the fact that be careful when you go find a tutorial for something that is fairly modern on Flutter, because the Flutter is evolving very quickly, and you can find yourself with a tutorial that's old, and things have been deprecated or just aren't the right way to do it now, even. So always, whenever you're looking at how to do something, kind of pay attention to how old the tutorial is.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same for, that advice is not just one for this, it's just all programming. I think the more you do it, the more you kind of learn, you go, oh, this is probably old, right? Like you understand the concepts and I just start using it. Something, if you're talking about old stuff, and just say briefly on Android, since we're here, in the documentation, let's see if I can use the documentation even now. Let's see if I can get a class.
If you can spell it right.
Yeah.
If I could
doesn't matter.
Acton.
It's Google is gonna fix him. Yeah.
It's
Google,
the
right?
German way of spelling it. Yes.
It's this one. So, for example, here it actually tells you this is from API level 1. This is the very first days of Android. This is where this came from, right?
Yeah.
And then you can also say
And now you're at level 33, right?
Yep, 30. Might be 35 now. I don't know. It's
okay. We use 33 in our project, I think. Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, you can then it gives there's a lot of information you'll find about everything, but all the classes and all those wonderful things you'll find everywhere, life cycle, fun stuff. Anyway, we won't bore you, but anyway, there's a lot to learn, and don't expect to learn everything. You learn by doing, right? And follow some courses, follow some tutorials, try things out. Look at an API and go, oh, what's App Ops Manager? Let's try that out, and learn some stuff, right? Anyway.
And before we take the next question, I just want to say we're almost at the top of the hour. And if, Simon, you're going to do any code showing, you're going to show some code, we better start. Let's have about 5 more minutes of questions, and we're going to cut off, and you're going to have to come back in 167 hours and get your questions asked, because we want to have some time. Yeah, get your questions now. I'm going to do 5 minute more, and I'm going to cut it off. Okay?
All right. Let's carry on.
How can a file be transferred through Bluetooth within the Flutter app? I bet you'd use the Bluetooth libraries.
Yep. So obviously to use any hardware feature of the device is different from Android and iOS, and then there's packages out there that do this for you. So either find yourself a Bluetooth package that does file transfer and has that feature, or you can alternatively don't even bother, which is what I would suggest you do, and just use the share package, the Share Plus. Because what's going to happen is on the local platform, when it offers the share options, one of those options will be share via Bluetooth. And then the user can just choose that and then choose to send it. And then that whole Bluetooth bit is outside of your app. You don't have to deal with it. Easy peasy. That's what I would recommend. But if your feature of your app requires you to send through Bluetooth, and that's something that you want to bring into your app for that specific purpose, then you'll have to find a library.
Because
I'm trying to think of a library that supports it.
If you want to handle it yourself, then it's more fun, because it's not only that you're transferring some stream over radio connection, but you also have to write it somewhere, which means you need to have a permission right there. And it's a file system, right?
Yeah, you actually mean build the package themselves. So you mean?
Yeah.
Rather than using a package.
If you want to do like a transfer that, okay, I'll be handling it, right? So that's.
I mean, the problem with, I will mention this now. The problem with building packages and plugins, and I think everyone should be doing this, is the same as the previous question I was asking. You need to learn stuff about the platform. So, for example, in this case, I would go just make an Android project and start playing around with Bluetooth on Android, and then go make an iOS project, understand Bluetooth, understand the capabilities, what the API is, and then you can go make a plugin that does just the one specific thing you need from both, right? But yeah, don't dive headlong into it, because it will be.
If you don't know that, you go to the pub.dev and you find a package which does this for you, which either has something developed, using channels going to the platform, iOS, Android, web, whatever, does this stuff for you, like saving to the local storage, using shared preferences or whatever, transferring something through the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever. And you use these packages, and then you don't have to look inside essentially communication with a platform, right? Because now
go on.
Yeah,
this is the one that I've used before, which is the one by Philips Hue. But this is Bluetooth Low Energy, which is something slightly different to your usual Bluetooth file transfer, which is the full-fledged Bluetooth. So maybe just take a look through and see if you can find some good Bluetooth packages that do what you want.
As you can see there on this package that you just showed, there were permissions for Android that you have to add to actually enable this. Can you look back?
And Simon, I think you just answered kind of my question. I was going to ask if anybody in here had a favorite Bluetooth package, because it always looks like a black art when I try to figure one out.
I'm trying to remember. Oh, was it Flutter Blue? Wasn't it Flutter Blue?
Mm-hmm.
Flutter Blue Plus. This was a popular package and has been for some time. This actually does cross-platform, but if it's just low energy standard is still something, but it works differently. It's not your standard sort of file transfer between devices, which I believe is the standard Bluetooth API, which I don't know. I would have to honestly. I would go research it, understand it, and then try and find a package that says it covers that specific. Like here, Bluetooth serial, scanning for Bluetooth basic. This says find device and send and receive raw bytes. So maybe that does what you want.
And you look if the package is maintained, how many likes it has, how many people actually found it essentially useful, and does it do everything you need, right? And does it comply with the version of Dart you're using?
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. I've got to go. The day job calls.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you next week.
See you. Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump on to another question. Hopefully that helps, Mitho.
Is there a way to test the iOS build of a Flutter app on a Windows machine? No. No. Next question. What would be the best way to present an app to the customer for reviews?
What you can do is change your default target platform to iOS, target platform iOS. It's a global variable default target platform. You can do it in your main method. You can also do it's exactly what happens if you're in the Flutter inspector in your IDE and you tap the platform switch button. This means on an Android device you can run it as if it's iOS. So the UI will behave as if it's iOS. It'll bounce and do all that. So in effect, you are seeing it on iOS, but obviously, like things like, as we just said, if you're communicating with Bluetooth on iOS, that's not going to work. It doesn't work that way. It'd be working the Android way and so on. So not exactly the same. However, if you're trying to get the look and feel of your app and you're behaving from your app that's iOS, that should hopefully get you that. Otherwise, I would honestly recommend you just. The problem with this is it's just the way Apple works. You need a Mac device. That's why we basically said no. There are two solutions that I think are quite viable solutions. One is Mac Minis. Mac Minis are a cheap alternative to buying. You're not buying a really small laptop with like really very expensive screen and everything else. It's just Mac Mini. You can plug it into your network and you can actually connect to it from a Windows machine, for example. Using VNC, remote desktop stuff. So that's one of them. That makes that means you've got a headless build server that you can run, and from your Windows machine you could run builds on your Mac, right? So that's one thing you can do. Another thing to do is if you don't want to buy a physical device, you could rent one. So there's several places online. I forget the names of these websites, but there's several websites. Mac Stadium, does that ring a bell to people? Am I getting the name right? It feels like that's one I've used before.
Mac in Cloud. I've heard of Mac in Cloud. If you just Google for rent Mac in Cloud, I'm sure you'll find a number of places.
I don't know them, but the Mac Stadium. I don't know any of these people personally, but I've used Mac Stadium in the past. And against this, you can basically, pricing. I don't know what their pricing is right now. So you can get a Mac Mini on the web. How much is that? $99 a month. So
and if you only need it for testing, you can always use our friend CodeMagic. Has basically Macs in the cloud that they build your system on, but you can tell it to pause while it's building, and you have a VNC connection to a full live Mac that you can basically do whatever you want with time period. But you're paying for the time that you're burning there, but the rates are really competitive. So
I mean, all of this is
Hackintosh.
Sorry, what?
We don't advocate this Hackintosh route.
Everyone did that once, at least once.
To be honest, I mean it's an alternative. I mean, I know people that even run Apple macOS in like VMs, right? There's a lot of things, but none of them are going to be. If you're trying to build an app on a platform, never mind legals. If you're just trying to build an app, you need the resources from a real machine. And to be honest, if you're a Flutter developer and see yourself doing iOS work or want to do cross-platform for a long period of time, invest in a Mac Mini and just make the purchase is what I'd say.
As a challenge, build an app that essentially you make your Android device essentially show the Android UI, and when you turn it around, it shows Mac. I mean, iOS.
That's funny. That'd be fun.
It'll be good enough for everyone.
Yep. Yes, we cannot advocate Hackintosh just because that's not really a legal path to go. So we officially cannot.
We would never say such a thing.
We would never say such a thing. Anyway, using Firebase Analytics, according to the documentation, set user property should be called once on a device instance when the user uninstalls and installs at a later time. Next one. This is a two-parter. How does the Firebase Analytics keep track of the user property since it generates a new app ID device instance for the device? It can't.
It can't. So the documentation, I think maybe you read the documentation wrong, or the set user properties are literally based on the app install ID.
Yeah.
So when it says device instance, I think it means that if your app, you only need to call it once in the instance, you don't need to call it every single time. I think they're basically saying, right? So every time your app runs, you don't need to call it because it stores it in a cache locally. So that each following request that Firebase Analytics makes, it continues with that set user property. But it is definitely linked to the actual installation ID, the app, not just the app ID, which is like the application ID, but it's called an installation ID. It's Firebase IID, which is an installation ID, and basically each time your app is installed on a device, that installation of that app for that user on that device gets given a unique token, and that token is how it keeps track of anything. That's what you should be using as well if you want to keep track of, or just generate UUID the first time your app is run and store it, and that's your ID for the user's installation.
And I wanted to broaden this just a bit because I get asked this from time to time, or I see these questions go by on all the usual socials, is how do I get the unique ID of the hardware that this is running on? And I go, the stores have made it harder and harder and harder to do that. The reason for that is they want to be able to sell you hardware. And if it's any difficulty at all to take everything I've bought and saved and run it immediately on a new piece of back-end hardware, like I just wanted to upgrade, or I lost mine, or it got stolen or something, right? The harder and harder that is to do that, the more displeasure the customer base feels. Also, that if you can track the unique ID of the system, you can do tracking that isn't really authorized by the individual users in that sense. So very wary of that now, and it's getting harder and harder to do that. It's still possible, but it's really, really hard now.
With privacy concerns,
but this question asks actually how Firebase Analytics actually keeps track. So the analytics tracking is slightly different thing, and usually you need to get a user consensus that actually you allowing to be tracked in your app, and essentially it keeps your forever your profile. So that's something which usually compromises your general knowledge about your account, Google account, whatever devices that you used, and some other things. And this is how the analytics essentially are able to track you, even if your app ID is different elsewhere, right? But it's a user consent that you allow essentially this to be tracked, and you as a programmer, you have to make a user aware of it, that you want to track it. And the Play Store and App Store will gonna essentially force you to have this prompt and request why you want to track it or for what reason, right? So it's always essentially like this. So
you can't.
They have tools to do that, but you have to be explicit with your customer base, which essentially will be tracked. Then, hey, you will be tracked. Do you want this to happen, or you have an opt out and say, no, I don't want to be tracked. And they may lose some context essentially of the adverts they're receiving and start become irrelevant, because, but they know that and they agreed to that.
So to be clear, that's about tracking via like multiple installations across installations, but having a app, like an installation ID, and tracking someone's analytics based on that particular installation is perfectly reasonable. You still have to report, that's all GDPR and like other things. I'm not going to go privacy stuff. You can go read the App Store stuff for that. But my point here is that the original question was about how do they keep track of this, and they don't. It's a mistake either in the documentation or your understanding of the documentation. You cannot they don't ask for the ID, and they don't track across the property across multiple installations. Each installation gets a different ID. And so the idea is to think about this as an analytics. They report analytics as one installation. You uninstall the app, you install it again. You don't get the same user ID, like the same installation ID, but it will be the same user ID if you logged into the application, right? So that's what they're saying. So this unique combination of user ID and installation ID, they know you've got a completely new session, they know it's separate, but you're not reporting 2 users because it's 1 user that continued, but there's no joining of those 2 sessions. Anyway, let's move on to analytics. Is fun, but we need to get on to more questions.
What's the difference between isolate and async wait? Ooh, where are the situations that makes each one stand out? This is a good, nice, clever question. And a frequently asked question for some reason.
Well, so one isolate runs multiple asynchronous tasks, right? So that's first of all. So async and await is about asynchronous tasks. Now, you'll go if you go look up coroutine. Coroutine is the nearest simile between that and asynchronous tasks. The general approach is that you're starting some sort of process, and I'm trying to not use terms that we use that can get confusing. The things like threads, these are not threads. You cannot use the term thread. But the term thread is short for thread of execution. It basically means if you think about your program source code, it runs statement by statement by statement. That thread of execution is one flow. Now you can actually have that function wait, and then what's going to happen is that main isolate is going to go pick up another task that can go run whilst it's waiting, and again and again and again. So the idea here is that you can essentially chain lots of asynchronous processes together in one thread of operation, one sort of processor thread, and that's kind of where an isolate comes in. It's a bit more complicated than that because isolates have thread pools, and because of the way that async works, they can actually have multiple threads and efficiently do it for a CPU and all this kind of fun stuff. There is actually a great page, Dart currency.
Can I explain it in like one sentence, Simon?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so async and await we're gonna work on the same part of memory. What isolates are essentially different parts of the memory which you communicate between. You have to communicate between them, which have some processor power, some threads attached to it to do the job, but they're separate.
Yeah.
Think about it like
not one sentence.
In Android, you have processes as well. You can have asynchronous execution, but have a process, which means I cannot take a variable from another because it's a different part of memory I don't have access to. So that's the isolate for you.
So it's one sentence that uses semicolons. It's one sentence.
I do want to explain it. So if anyone is if you're watching this on a desktop and you're on Windows, you can have a task manager. On Mac, you can have an activity monitor, and you'll see a list of processes. Right, these are programs that are running right now on your computer. One of them is going to be Chrome or whatever that you're watching this on right now. That has a memory address attached to it. That's a set of memory that only the threads of that's like the things that run on the processor, right, are going to have access to that memory. So a process is a group of threads and memory together, right? However, there's a problem. If 2 threads try and access the same memory at the same time, that's a problem because one might be changing while the other's trying to read it. These are concurrency problems. This is known throughout, like what was the name for this? Throughout the like you'll see a whole sort of suite of concurrency problems in programming that go around this topic, right? And modern languages avoid this, and they avoid this by going one extra level above this, and that's where isolates and coroutines come in. That allows you to abstract away this notion of threads, and it's very more important because originally programs were single-threaded. That is, a processor had one CPU, and it'd run one thing at any one time. And that meant that it was scheduled processes, right? So only one process was ever running. Now we have multiple cores, and it expands upon this big sort of whole spill of like how processes with high priority threads, high priority cores, low priority cores, and all this kind of fun stuff. Basically, this means that this notion of threading and how the CPU handles memory and everything else needs to be abstracted away to really get the most effective use of the CPU. And that's kind of where isolates and async come in to kind of like abstract away from that.
From the perspective of a Dart programmer, though, and I think we could bring it back to this. Isolates are essentially completely isolated, hence their name. They're separate. They have their own currently executing line of code. They each are separate. They have their own set of data. Each is separate. But within one of those isolates, you have what I used to still call cooperative multitasking. What that means is your program will run line by line by line without interruption, without anybody else interrupting, until you get to something like an await. The moment you hit an await, or you finish a future and it's calling a then, which has an await somewhere deep inside, the moment you do that, the scheduler for your isolate can say, oh, I've got this other thing that's ready over here. I'm going to run it right now, and I'm going to set you aside just for a second. But that's the only time you get context switches within an isolate, is that it's a cooperative multitasking setup, synchronous execution between those conjunction points.
I just love that we talk about these things. I just listened to all of the phrases you just hit there, and it's like I get a bunch of new phrases for people to go look up. It is definitely like
come up. They're classic terminology. Come on.
I think there's just so much to like learn, especially around like execution of code, that a lot of programmers don't follow, and that's fine. Like a lot of modern languages, you don't need to know this. I think it's good to understand how the sort of the stuff works under the hood, for sure. But I think just understanding how it works in the language that you're doing is more important. So understanding isolates.
I have to tell you that my knowledge comes from many, many, many years with playing with Unix. I first typed the ls command in 1977, so I go way back with Unix. Okay, and understanding the forking model, I'm not trying to swear there, understanding the forking model of processes in Unix, so that how you get like completely separate memory spaces virtually, never physically they're managed some other way, but virtually you basically have your own memory space, and how they deal with each other, and how there's nothing shared at all. And then we started introducing threads within those. And when I was doing Perl, we were doing this thing called PO, which had cooperative multitasking, and I had to figure out what that meant. And then we introduced the equivalent of async and await in Perl, and I had to figure out how that worked. And I got all that done before I ever came to Dart. I went, oh yeah, this is async await. That's a thread. That's nice. I get it. It's too fast to get it because I already had all this experience from all these other languages and platforms and frameworks. So there we go.
So I've posted this link. If you really want to know about Dart and its concurrency model, and go check out the page, concurrency in Dart. It's the latest in documentation that kind of goes into it. It does cover some bits about isolates and everything else. You can go read it, but it covers the sort of underlying system about how the event queue works, and about how the main isolate handles things and background work and different isolates and so on.
To understand the context of what is designed this way, is good to understand what the problems may occur if you try to do concurrency without isolates. And you have a threading problems in Java. If you just type in Google Java concurrency problems, you can find courses and everything. So what can happen if someone tries on one thread to write 1 byte in some memory, and someone tries to read at the same time you're writing? It's like you've written 3 bits of it, and someone read it already, and they not get a new or old value. They got gibberish, like completely.
Yeah.
Right. This is what happens when you have a free access to memory all the time from many threads.
If you just started with Dart for concurrency, be happy you never have to learn the word locks.
And
you never have to deal with locks ever.
I'm gonna like swear to programmers right now. It's gonna be mutex, semaphores, spin locks. it's like there's so many things that you need to deal with when you're doing multi-threading that like automaticity in operations is just like
I actually a couple days ago had the thought, can you make a mutex with futures? And then I was thinking, what am I thinking? I don't need a mutex. It's already mutexed. It's done. I don't need to do that. I only have one thread in here. So we don't need to deal with any of that stuff.
If people are interested, there is actually a documentation by one of the Dart engineers that worked on the compiler about suspendable functions and how they operate internally. If you're interested, inside the links to actually the source code of Dart and how all the async stuff works. If you really want to understand, then there's a bunch of documentation here, and I'll post that in the chat so that if you want something to look up. But honestly, it's highly technical, and Dart developers don't really need to know this. If you work on the engine, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, from a high level, no. I do think that there's also quite a few videos on YouTube that do talk about like these kind of ideas of like threads, isolates, async, coroutines. So go watch some of those because they do some nice graphics that can kind of really help explain it. All right, moving on.
Yeah. We just hand wave, and it's not quite the same thing. These aren't graphics. These are real hands. To Simon, regarding the Shopify app gist, that must be something you know about. How to handle if there are two screens on top, like the token has expired, how to pop all those screens until reaching the first view without a black screen. Does that even make sense to you, Simon? I hope.
I'm going to go look at my gist because I'm assuming he's talking about one of my gists.
A Shopify app gist, right? You must have a hotkey for that, don't you?
Oh, look, I found a Shopify app gist.
Oh, nice.
There you go. Who'd have thunk it? Let's see.
Something you wrote like a year ago.
Something I wrote a long time. Oh, yeah, I think someone was asking about, I think this was actually on the stream. Like this was someone asking about how to call the Shopify or API or something. I don't remember. And we call it to display something like idea. Maybe it was Roberta, sorry. Anyway, so you're asking how to pop. Well, I mean, I'm assuming this is using Navigator 1 and not Navigator 2. Let's have a quick butchers and see if I can see the Material app. Yeah, home builder. Yeah. So in a Navigator in Navigator 1, you can actually do a pop until, and you can also do push replacement pop. I'm gonna have to go look at the API now. It's been a while. Let's go
pop and juggle and
right. So when you get either you do navigator of and you get navigator state returned, or you can do like a navigator key and get a navigator state. If you do navigator 1, this is, and then down here finally there should be a what's it? I can't find push and remove until. That's the one. So basically push a new one and then removes the things underneath, and that should do it without a black screen. And basically you give it a predicate like this. Now this route will have settings attached to it, so you can actually do instead of returning false, you can do route.settings, and those settings are the ones that you build when you build your route. In this case, it would normally be the default route settings, and default route settings has a name, and that's your route name. So by default, you can compare that name inside the predicate and go, okay, is this the root of my app? Is this the home screen? Then stop there, so you don't get a black screen. So what happens is people do that. Well, first of all, what you're talking about with the black screen, people are doing this, and then they do the default predicate, which basically means remove everything, which means you get a black screen, and then it puts your login screen on top. But if you want to go back to like a home screen or a splash screen or whatever it is, and then push your thing on top, then yeah, you need to do that. Now you can do that by, as I said, like each thing you push on the stack, you push with routes with settings. Either use a material if you turn a material route widget. By default, if you do named routes, you get the default route settings, and that all works. If you do custom routes, again, there's actually settings on all material route, Cupertino route, all those like page route builder. They all have a settings parameter, and you can just fill it in yourself with whatever you want. And if you're using pages, the page API, that is route settings of pages, and you can extend that and add whatever fields and parameters and variables that you want to make your determination if you want to pop the page or not. And that's essentially what it is. So if we go back here, you've also got push named and remove until. There's also a pop until somewhere. I think if you remember rightly. Yeah. So you can pop until and then just do push, right? The idea of doing the push and remove until is that it pushes on top, and removes things underneath, so you never see like a flicker on the screen. So it's very similar to push replacement in that sense. But hopefully that helps.
We'll see.
Yeah. Another nice thing to say is with all this kind of stuff, like the whole idea of the Navigator 1 API was very much a stack-driven approach. You don't actually get to examine the stack. It's very much like you're working top-down. You can't remove things further down the stack. Like you can't, like, let's say you got 10 pages on your stack. You can't just go remove page 5. You have to remove down to page 5. It's always working at the top of the stack, right? Whereas if you
It essentially gives you the standard navigation for a mobile device, right, for iOS and Android, and that's the whole point. You normally don't do that.
If you want,
you can try to do these tricks that you try to push some things and pop until on Android as usual, but this is the whole point. And if you want to have like a full control of whatever is on your stack and how it is actually what is below. Let's say you want to react to device size change, like you developing on Windows, right? And you essentially changing the size of it. Then you want to manipulate your stack, and then you go for Navigator 2. But with Navigator 1, you essentially are limited to like a mobile approach to navigation.
So, to be clear that people don't understand, Navigator is still the widget that's used for Navigator for Navigator 1 and Navigator 2. The difference is they added 2 extra APIs. It's called the Pages API. This lets you control the entire page stack, and you can just do this yourself. You can literally override the builder. In fact, it's already done in that example, and return your own Navigator widget with your own key, and then just give it a list of pages, and then you can change that list however you want, and it will just rebuild the screen nicely. There's no push or pop or anything. You just change the list, and you're done. It doesn't kind of explain that here. And then if you really want to like take the pages more, Router helps. Router, and this gets way more complicated, but Router, I did talks on these, by the way. Go look up my talks. But Router actually means that you get to sort of control the detailed levels of routes. You can have routes within routes and all this kind of really complex routing behavior. What I would just say, though, is, even if you use Navigator 2, it still does Navigator 1 on top. But for the most part, if you can get away with Navigator 1, probably use that. There's lots of pages. There's lots of packages for Navigator 2. We mentioned it before, like Beamer, Route Master, Go Router. There's a ton of these Navigator 2 packages, that you can use, and that would also help. But to be honest, if you're just trying to take the example and do this, it's push and remove until, and then use a predicate to determine when you should stop removing, basically. All right, moving on.
Yes. Using HiveDB, I have stored about 20 megabytes of objects inside it. That doesn't sound like very much. But when I'm trying to read the data, the screen hangs. So I've used compute, but compute is not allowing to call methods of the Hive class. Isolate problem.
I have exactly the answer that you need. I actually talked about last. It is
a win.
Now. I just literally forgot the name of it.
If you can find it. While you're doing that, I also asked him if he had tried isolate.run to see if it was any different, and apparently not. So it didn't work. And apparently same reason. It's across country boundaries.
So this is what you're missing. So there's background isolate binary messenger. So basically, don't use. So first of all, don't use the compute method. Use isolate.run. That's the first thing, right? Literally, if you go look at the compute method, underneath it calls isolate.run, right? So just use isolate.run. That's the new hotness, right? Inside your isolate.run method, you want to call background isolate binary messenger class dot ensure initialized, and it's a top level static function. Where is it? Ensure initialized, and you give it what's called a root isolate token. And then you get this from before you call your isolate. So that's outside of your isolate run method. You can get your root isolate token from the platform dispatcher, I think it is.
Wow.
Services binding. There you go. There's an instance property. There you go. So you can actually do root isolate token dot instance on the outside, and essentially does the same thing. But But basically, the idea about this is it links the outside isolate and its binary messenger for communicating with the platform to your secondary isolate that you run using compute, right? Isolate.run. And this means that you can actually run Flutter plugins and access Flutter plugins from background isolates. And that's the problem you're probably having with this, that is complaining that you're not allowed to call the methods of the Hive class on the background isolate. I'm assuming that's why. That's normally the case. That's quite a common behavior. However, obviously, isolate may have a restriction saying you're going to be called on the main isolate. I don't know. So I suspect that's probably what your problem is. I'd also say that I'm kind of interested about what you're doing with this object. So trying to load that amount of data shouldn't stall your main threads, because that's done. I know it's all done in Dart, but I believe it should be okay. I would obviously probably try and transition. So you can do what's called, most apps don't have this, but what's called an upgrade path. It's this notion that you store in shared preferences, let's say, the current version of the app or the previous version. When the app starts up, you go, okay, is my current version from package info, is that different from the one I had saved? Oh, it is. Oh, so I've gone from the version 1 that I had installed to now version 2. Okay, I'm going to transition from using Hive to now using ISAR. And that's what I was getting to. So probably transitioning to the next iteration of Hive. So Simon, the creator of Hive, also did ISAR. I think he did both, if I remember rightly. But basically, ISAR is actually a better API set. It's meant to be the next sort of like go-to hardness. I may be completely wrong about who made it. I'm going to forgive me for that. But the point here is try seeing if using alternatives also solves your problem, right? If you find that using, I don't know, SQLite solves your problem, great, try that. But you shouldn't be trying to load 20 megabytes all at once. If you're loading it in chunks, like each item, each one of those things ends up being one of those asynchronous tasks we were just talking about, and then it will schedule them, and you won't. Only ISAR by the same name, by the same depth. There you go. It is by the same depth. Okay, cool. I was right. I was concerned there. There you go. So move. So what you can do here is use what I just said, and then use ISAR, right? But what you do is you do the upgrade path, and then it means that you can then migrate the data. So when they start the app up on the splash screen, you can go start this upgrade path and show a little progress and saying migrating your data or something or whatever you want to say. And then during that period, you can be copying all the data from the Hive database to the ISAR database and then deleting the Hive database. And then your next version of your app, you can remove the Hive database dependency and entirely, right? Or something like that. But yeah, there's always ways forward.
I'll be ducking out. So see you next time.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for joining us, Swav.
Thank you. Cool. All right. So what do you guys think of the approach of returning errors inside of a record? Ooh, I've got opinions on this. Instead of throwing them, just similar to Golang approach to handle errors. So I'll let you start, Simon, but you know what package I'm going to bring up.
I think I do. To be honest, if like the model of throwing exceptions is a model that you're still going to have to handle, right? It's still always, because that's how Dart handles errors. So by just getting rid of by not throwing exceptions doesn't mean you can't stop handling exceptions, right? Because you might be calling code like IO routines that can throw exceptions, right? So at some point you're going to have to try catch those and return an error. I think it's more about how you want to handle your error logic and error behavior. Normally, recoverable errors, you want to actually recover from them, and in which case you may do something similar to this, which is where you can essentially return back a record with like a error field and a data field or some such thing. I think records for doing this, it works. I'm not sure I'd use it as an entire pattern. Probably using something more like a sealed class or something more appropriate to having multiple fields and extending that behavior would probably be more ideal than a record. But if it works for you, go for it. Yeah.
Now, what I'm going to say is if you're going to start removing exceptions from your system, well, first, about the using a record to return, I believe Andrea did that in a couple of his talks, which is why this is coming up now, because people are noticing, and this is new Dart 3 stuff, being able to handle an error by having an error and valid return as 2 slots in a record. But if you're going to start doing stuff like that, I highly recommend taking the dive into functional programming and looking at the FP Dart package. That is a full, complete, mature, well-documented, well-tested system, getting updates monthly, typically, with new and cooler things happening to it. Sandro is doing an amazing job of documenting this stuff. He's got 0 to expert stuff for free tutorials on FP Dart, including how to use them with RiverPod, how to use them with you mixing in with other systems, all sorts of wonderful stuff. What this gives you, and this is the long roundabout answer to this, what that gives you is the concept of a either class. And an either is either a left, something went wrong, or a right, something is all good, and they're both strongly typed as they're being passed around. And it's a monad. Don't get scared by the word, but it's a monad, which means it can be chained. It can be used interpretively in consequential computations. It's a really mature system. It's really like one of the 5 packages I tend to put in pretty much every application I write now. So it has ways of running a try-catch without saying try-catch, and then automatically returning back an either from that. Very cool stuff. So I would say check out FP Dart. I'll put the link in the chat in a second. Cool. So that's what I would say. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've not really got much to add to that, to be honest.
Yeah, I try to be thorough. That's part of my job too, you know. I'm just about to put the link in under my name. Actually, I could put it in the official chat here. Hold on.
Right.
Make sure I don't close the wrong screen.
In Java Android app, Google Dev Docs say it would add 1 megabyte to app size when using enums.
What?
I'm
what? No.
I'm not sure about that one. That doesn't sound right. Maybe that's some old documentation.
Citation needed.
Yeah,
I want to know where you read that. I really do.
I mean, I can. No.
That's like, yes, Google for that. While you're doing that, I'm going to say it's similar to the nonsense I just was arguing about with somebody. Somebody said categorically only use stateless widgets because they're faster, more performant than stateful widgets. And I'm going, no, you might be doing something with the stateful widget that takes more time, but that's a different thing you're doing then. If you're comparing apples and apples, stateless and stateful, the difference would be microseconds. You're not going to notice any difference. It's just running slightly different code paths.
I'm not honestly seeing like this. I think there is a mention here.
Citation needed. Yep.
I'm kind of curious actually. I'm going to find it now. I swear it's just here this way. Yeah. So avoid enumerations is something in the here. In the reduce your app size guidelines, it says avoid enumerations. A single enum can add 1 to 1.4 kilobytes of size to your app. So single enum to your classes.dex files. These additions can quickly accumulate. I'll be honest with you, I would just ignore this.
Yeah, that's like what?
I mean, it's not wrong, but also adding this size to your app. First of all, I don't know what how many bytes a single enum would add to a Dart app, but I think don't get me wrong, every byte counts, but I would just
optimize your app icon. It'll probably reduce that.
Yeah, I was gonna say like maybe more than that. The 1 megabyte limit I think you're talking about is actually on so Dart has a thing called Binder. Sorry, not Dart. Android. Sorry, I'll say this again. Android has a thing called Binder. Binder is the inter-process communication mechanism. We talked about this earlier. 2 different apps, 2 different processes. So let's say we have a Simon app, we have a Randall app running on our phone. if I want to send Randall some data, it has to go through Binder to get to Randall. So Binder is the interprocess mechanism that two things can communicate. And currently, as it says here, has a fixed 1 megabyte limit for all transactions currently in progress by the process, which is like a hard limit. If you try and do anything more, you'll get transactions too large exception. There are other ways to get around that, but by using this is the same as for other mechanisms. Use the Binder to transact like a local port number and stuff, and then Randall will go listen on that port or try and connect to a local port. Then I send data over a network socket. Or you can use shared memory, and there's a bunch of other mechanisms for what's called IPC, interprocess communication. But that is completely off topic to what your question was, sorry, which is it the same in Dart? Most languages, if you add more code, will add more to your app, right?
Right.
Does that simple, right? You add more class, you're going to add more size. You add more this, you add more size, right? But practically reducing for no reason is not gonna, you're not gonna see a gain for it. There's things like compression. Like doing micro optimizations and go, I'm going to reduce the number of enums I use so I can reduce my app size is nonsensical. Don't do that. And I mean, like, I'll give an example here. Literally compressing your app, which is what it does anyway, gets you more of a size gain than any reduction, like those kind of things.
Right.
Things like
I especially don't want to discourage using enums. I'm actually learning the advanced property or just the advanced strategy of, even if you only have two states, I know a bool will represent that. But then you're forever thinking, does false mean this or does true mean this? And you might accidentally sign the bool to another bool in another thing when it shouldn't be. Even if you only have two states, make an enum. It's so much easier. It types it strongly. And then the day that somebody says, now I need 3 states, you don't have to rewrite a whole creepy pile of code. So use enums when you can. They're really, really handy.
And talking about enums, I think it might be on this page. This is the official enum page, and then we'll see here, like, this is how you declare an enum, blah, 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 blah. You can actually do enhanced enums. Here's an example of
I've been doing those. Enum. Those are great. Yeah.
And this allows you to basically redefine the constructor for the enum, allowing you to define these enum entries with new parameters. And by doing this alone, now saying, it's comparable, adding a compare function, now you have whatever like set of objects that you want grouped together, and you're giving them some typed information, and you can use them in whatever you want. But this, you
can use defaults. You can use defaults in that constructor. I was just using that the other day where I wanted to add an extra field, but I only wanted it for like one of my 11 enum cases. And I just said, okay, then the default is false for the rest of them. It was so cool that I could just put the constructor the way I wanted it to be, and it just did the right thing.
And another thing people I think since we're talking about enums briefly, another thing people misuse is if you have a vehicle an instantiation of vehicle as a variable, and it's like you set it to the value of car, people store car.name in like their shared preferences to choose what they chose. The problem with doing this is that if you rename this symbol inside your software, you broke their saved shared preferences, right? So for example, if when they start up the app, you want it to select car, bus, or bicycle based on what they had previously, and then you put a capital in here, or you wanted to rename these or do some change, suddenly you broke the app, right? Because you used name. And name is intrinsically this symbol, the text that you type here, right? Also, if you do obfuscation, that those names can be obfuscated, just FYI. People then go and go, I'm going to go use index. Well, the same problem. If you reorder your enums, the index changes. That's why these enhanced enums are really good, because you can put a key name in here or some variable, and then you're saying, this ID, whatever you want to call it, like a string, is always attached to this enum and will always be representative. So it doesn't matter if you change the order, change the name, the ID remains the same, and that's what you save and restore. People get that wrong quite often. So yeah, sorry, didn't want to hark on about it, but I do want to mention it because it's one of those little things.
from Daily WTF. Yes,
Yeah.
the bad tri-state Boolean. Yes,
Well
awesome
done.
stuff. All right, let's keep.
Right,
We got
next.
six more to go here. Let's get this done. What do you
Yeah.
think of Skinner's Flutter widget view? Simple separation of layout and logic, along with get it and watch it. I find it much easier to understand and closer to the SDK than, say, RiverPod. Oh, don't be dissing my RiverPod in this show. But let's check it out. What are they talking about?
I've never. Well, first thing I'm going to say is I've not seen it. So
okay.
Was it widget view?
Widget view, I guess.
I'm not finding a package. Let me see if I can Google this. Oh yeah.
You're throwing us for a loop.
Let's have a look. Why not? Great advertisement. I'm Sean does awesome work at G Skinner here. So
yeah.
Yeah, imperative mixer, Android XML, signal to noise ratio, the usual stuff. So basically, how much boilerplate maybe you have around doing something, yada yada yada. Not even large tree by Flutter standards. So how can we make this better? Sure. Have a standard approach. What's then?
We're speed reading something. Take an hour to read. This is great. We're just trying to find the important parts to answer your question.
Multiple build methods, frameworks. I mean, these are all like the comments. Here, now we're down to the good thing. The widget view pattern. This is what they wanted to talk about. Okay. Design pattern.
I was going to say you should feed this whole thing into ChatGPT and then ask it to summarize and answer this guy's question.
Okay. Hang on. Each stateless widget has a child widget view, which contains a declarative view code. Okay. State acts as a standing controller, mediator, presenter for the widget view and corresponding view events provided. I mean, these are. I mean,
if it works.
I'll be honest with you, like
boilerplate. I don't know that it's reducing. I see view.
I mean, but you can just like. Though, I'll be honest with you. This is what I do anyway. If I want to do stuff, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if you're going to build an app, you build these patterns in your application, right? Like, if you want to like reduce it, you don't have to like, yeah. I mean, that's the nature of writing code. I don't know why you state. Yeah, I mean, basically, this is just bringing that separation. And what you're saying here is you're joining the widget, the build method, and the widget together by giving it the widget and then the controller. And the controller contains the logic, which is what I would do anyway. I mean, this is nice to do this. And then I'm assuming that then you can. Yeah, so here's like, okay, here's state. Here's what it used to be like. Or something. Let's look. State for widget, state. Stateless. So this is what it used to be like. And the separation of duties, here's where the widget controller comes in.
I sometimes wonder, not saying anything all about this author, but sometimes I see people building things that they remember from Java because Java wasn't as reactive of a structure as Flutter is. And I'm always wondering if that.
I'll be honest with you, I'm finding it quite hard to follow this briefly because it doesn't actually highlight the code and doesn't show this is the old way, this is the new way we like to use. Like it's not clear to me that what he's defining here, but this is the same sort of thing, right? You're giving it a controller, which is your state. State.widget.
I think, like we were saying earlier, whatever works for you, do it that way. And if this is easier for you to understand, and more importantly, explain to the members of your team, because when you're working with other people, it doesn't help to go invent some really wacko, unique system. Hopefully, all of G Skinner is on board with this system because apparently this author's using it. So we'll, use whatever works to leverage your time. I mean, that's what programming is. That's what meta programming also is. It's like figuring out the patterns and implementing those. So you get to write that code just once instead of retyping the same 17 lines of boilerplate every time. So yeah.
I have a little concern around this though. So he's making a stateless widget. So this a widget view extend. So okay, so I think I understand this grasp.
Extending stateless widget.
But then you have this a notion of a final state variable.
Kind of coming in sideways. What a stateful widget does.
I guess because this doesn't hold. I mean, this is just used as an accessor. It's not actually used to actually hold that state. You're still going to have this state held outside of the stateless widget, right? I don't know. I need to kind of boggle down into this more, but to be honest,
short answer is we haven't seen it before. Simon's absorbing it as fast as he can. And
I'll be honest with you, I've written similar things before, and it's just the same as if you were to put. In this case, the idea I think here is that you're extending. You've got this notion of a stateless view and a widget view, and this extends some of the existing functionality, and then from that you can access your state in a nice way. So, and I do this all the time. So what you do is you just make a class over here, which is your business logic, and you have your widget over here, and then you instantiate that class, either pass it in or have it. In this case, it's held in a variable called state. And then whenever you have an onPress, you do state.onPress, then pass that function in your UI code. This gives you separation of UI and logic, which is what you should be doing anyway.
Here's a comment from current chat here.
Looks a bit like the stack pack. I've not tried it.
I don't know stack.
It sounds interesting. I think I would like to see, probably look at some of their video here. Maybe there's an example of this running in an entire project to kind of better visualize it, but it's interesting.
I would say also, though, that Get It is a great package as a locator. I love it. It's really good for just that. Riverplot, of course, can be a locator, so I never need a separate locator package. Watch It, I've seen a little bit about. I haven't really gotten into it, but it's sort of like the second half of Riverpod. So there's I think Get It plus Watch It starts to get close to what Riverpod's doing, maybe, but I can't answer that without having looking more at Watch It. So
I didn't get to watch Thomas's talk on this stuff at FlutterCon. I missed it, so I'll go wait for the video. I think he doesn't talk on this.
If there's a video on it, then we'll watch that. Yes, awesome, yeah. Cool. All right.
I'd say choose whatever you want. Stick to, just have a pattern that you're sticking to and being consistent with.
Right.
And if you find that pattern no longer works with your structure of your code, restructure all your code to follow a new pattern. Right.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah, it looks interesting, and nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, good. We should have had that question emailed to us 3 days before the show. I'll just let you know for next time. If you have a package you want us to look at, be sure we know ahead of time. All right, guys, what are the essential skills and qualifications that a Flutter dev? I just
want to say, if you do want to email us at fluttercommunity.dev, you'll find us there. Right, go on. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
Where was I?
I was reading that. Okay. Okay. What are the essential skills and qualifications that a Flutter dev should possess in order to be considered for high-paying job opportunities in the current market? Apparently, I don't know.
So I always go to this Flutter roadmap. Yeah. So this is highly suited Flutter roadmap by Alexander. So this is just like a learning path. So I definitely say you need this. I think the problem you've got is, I put that link in the chat, so if anyone wants to go look at that. I think the problem you've got here is essential skills and qualifications Flutter dev should possess. I mean, I think a lot of them understand how to build Flutter apps. I think there's a notion of so you've got building mobile apps. It doesn't matter what language. There's things that are common across all platforms, right? This is like user experience, how to interact with a small form factor device, how touch interaction works, and how you might better not do scrolling within scroll, and then general things like that are behavioral, that things that are cross-platform, right? So you need to understand that side of things if you're doing mobile. Then again, you might be doing Flutter dev on desktop, in which case you need to go learn desktop UX and behavior and understand a bit about that. It's not about design, but it's about having an understanding about what is appropriate on that platform and knowing if something doesn't feel right and being able to to talk about that. This all still goes with this. By the way, that junior dev, definitely go look at that thing. That has a great learning path. But yeah, when it comes to being considered for high-paying jobs, you need to have experience, and you need to have experience in a lot of different fields, right? So, for example, is someone who's employing a Flutter developer probably wants someone that has experience of Android, has experience of iOS, so they can be given a task of going and doing like the Bluetooth thing that we spoke about earlier. Someone can go do that. That's going to get you like those high-paying jobs. So it's like
it's
understanding.
It's never just a Flutter job. This is the thing I have to ask every single job poster that I'm applying to get them as a client or maybe work for them full time if the right circumstances come up. But it's like it's never Flutter. It's Flutter plus a bunch of other technologies that the company is already using that I would need to know if I work there. And they may not think it's a requirement. They may just think Flutter is enough to decide whether you're in or not. But they'll typically then say, oh, yeah, and you must have native Android experience because we are porting something from native Android. Well, I don't have that. So that disqualifies me. But I need to know that up front. I need you to tell me I need not just Flutter, but maybe some weird back end like maybe it's the job involves Amplify and you've never worked with Amplify. Well, you can learn it, but it's best to know that up front, so you'll know the kinds of things you're not going to be able to answer in your interviews and the time, and even when day one on the job. So, it's always about multiple technologies. Get as broad as you can, specialize in a few, but get as broad as you can. Read up on all sorts of stuff. There's plenty of ways to get informed in this industry now. And there's probably an excessive number of ways to get informed, but try to be cosmopolitan. Try to pick up a little bit of everything so that you can at least be familiar with the terms or know what or where to search for it and get really good at Googling things.
And that's not to mention just like, you want to get as an advanced Flutter developer, start going looking into the API. Just look at all those classes and go, oh, how do I use this widget? How do I use this class? What's the information about it? Go read the source code, see what it does.
If you're an early Dart developer and you're not reading the entire protocols of list, map, and set on at least a monthly basis, you're missing out. That's for your early learning. Definitely go back. I still go back to those pages and I'm surprised by some method that I didn't remember was there. So those are key things, your collections and their protocols, all the methods they understand. Very important to learn.
Right. Let's get on. Yeah. Next. Right.
That's you. How to use Build Runner for code generation. I want to read some files, then generate Dart code. Yes, that's what Build Runner does. There is lots of documentation on Build Runner. If you have a specific question, we could have answered it. The first answer here, though, I'm just going to say, and Simon, you can correct me, is go read the Build Runner documentation.
Right.
It's in there. And there are plenty. This Build Runner is so core to doing almost anything that's really fancy in Dart and Flutter that there are lots and lots of tutorials and blog posts and YouTube videos on this. So there's a plethora, I got to use that word just for once, a plethora of information about this that if you do have a specific question, come on back in 166 hours and ask it. But otherwise, there's docs. Go check the docs.
Indeed. Right. Let's see what else. I'm
You're going to show the Build Runner page? It's like, no, it's the same
right.
thing.
No, I was trying to get to the.
Okay. List has a widget ABC. This is something earlier that we talked about. I scroll down, so widget A is not on the screen. Widget A should be removed now. Now, when I scroll up again, I only see B and C left. The issue is making it smooth. Ooh. So you need to know when something is no longer visible. You need to remove it from the list, but not change your scroll position. Is that possible with slivers, maybe?
Yes.
Is it? Really?
Yeah.
Can we show that?
Yeah. I think that's a good. good example of something we could definitely look towards. I know what the problem he's having is, and the issues that you have. Pardon me. First of all, scrolling tends to work off of a pixel offset, which means if you're working top down and you scroll up and you remove the thing above, what you've done is you've reduced the number of pixels that have been are in the list above, and therefore maybe move your scroll position, right? And that's essentially what probably you're experiencing here, where you kind of get some, like, you remove it and then it jumps or something like that. There's ways of changing your cache, your extent, and a few other things to kind of mitigate some of that. It has to have left the screen for quite some for the distance of the cache extent, I believe. But it still doesn't sort of solve that problem. There's a trick to this. I'm trying to think of a best. Well, we can talk about this in a minute, but let's get the
questions.
The last question. Yeah. We'll do a little bit of live coding. Hopefully, if I can get this thing building, it's not building right now.
Yeah. Okay. A session or two ago, you mentioned alternate methods of sharing state across widgets without provider or riverpod. Can you explain? Might this be dependency injection related?
Well, I mean, what you're probably talking about is build. So all provider and riverpod, if you're trying to get access to your global state, or your state, essentially your app state, from the widget hierarchy, use the build context. The build context has methods in it like find ancestor of state of exact type, and a bunch of these other methods on context. So you can do that. So that allows you to eventually walks the tree and finds it. The thing that we're talking about that's built in is called inherited widget. Inherited widget, there are lots of videos and talks on it now, and it's a bit hard to get your head around it, but basically inherited widget is like a provider to provide that further down. Normally what you want to do is you wrap an inherited widget with a stateless or stateful widget or something like that to kind of help utilize it. But again, that can be used. And there's also an inherited model, which can also be handy if you want to listen to only aspects of a particular thing. That's very similar to select from provider, and I think select in riverpod as well. I don't know.
Yes.
So so hopefully that helps. Maybe that kind of gets you in the right direction.
Right. So if you're talking about not using provider, I mean, what he's mentioning about inherited widget is essentially the mechanism that provider rebrands. It's really just using that, but it's a little bit easier because there's some boilerplate that can be inserted that provider does to keep you from writing the 5 times as many lines of boilerplate when you're doing inherited widget. Yeah, so it's sharing state. That's one way to share state. I don't know about dependency injection. You can also do stuff like that. I just use riverpod. It's simple. It's easy. You can scale it up from one provider up to 1,000 providers, and it still works. Anyway, yeah.
I am.
What are you doing?
Tragically trying to. My build process has failed on me, and I'm trying to fix it. Let's see if we get it working. Right. I think that ends the questions, right? I think that was the last question.
Yeah, and by the way, inherited widget has a flaw that made it so provider could never be fixed correctly. That's why Remy created riverpod, to work around that flaw. So yes, you can choose inherited widget. You're going to run into the same problem he did eventually, and that's why he abandoned provider. Provider is no longer being updated. It's just being maintained. If there's a security problem or an incompatibility breaking change, that's the only way provider's ever going to get any changes now. It's all in riverpod. Riverpod is doing some amazing maturing, getting better, faster, cheaper every release. Yeah. Anyway, Next, I guess. Should I do that for you? Should I change it for you? I can do that. Let's see here. We only got one more. Okay. Are you doing that?
No, that is the last one. It's the last one.
No,
it was a rephrase of the one.
Oh, that's it. That's it. Somehow the other one wasn't removed from the list. Okay.
That's it for questions.
Cool. We're done.
So
now Simon's busy working out what he's actually going to talk about. I think. Or he's writing on pen. He's writing with a pen. My goodness.
Yes.
I haven't seen that in a long time. What is that technology? It makes marks on your paper.
Yeah.
It makes marks on paper. Wow.
What's even great is when it's digital paper.
All right. You have that device.
Oh.
All right. So we're done with the questions for today. If you didn't get your question in today, come back in 166 hours. That's the number. However, we are continuing. We are moving forward with a live demo of Simon typing as fast and furiously as he can to try to demonstrate one or more topics today and something about slivers.
I think we're going to try some sliver stuff.
Slivers.
See if we can get this working.
Long John Sliver. Long John Sliver.
So there we go. It's about. I'll make font sizes bigger, I guess.
Enhance.
I think hopefully that's good enough for people, but I just
let us know
the layout.
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know if you can't see it. This is just like a little test project here with a bunch of stuff in it.
Cool.
Right. This is something I did a while ago, sliver layout. I'm just kind of taking a quick look at this. So I think I did this for desktop. But can I even move it? No. I think I was fiddling around with it. What have I done? I've messed things up here. Hang on. I think I turned off. Yeah, I did this for mouse because I was. Let's see.
Mouse.
I did this for a desktop example. So let's see.
I remember mice. I haven't used a mouse in a long time. Trackpads.
There we go. So this is kind of cool, right? So what you're seeing here is, as you can see here, we've got 2 green boxes, then a sliver scroll reveal, and 2 other blue boxes, which you can't see yet. And as you can see on this screen, we're slightly trying to reveal. And as you scroll up, this is slightly overlap. As you scroll up, it reveals until it's fully revealed. Then it gets dragged up like this.
Cool.
And then when it gets to the top,
that's awesome.
Isn't that nice? So it's kind of like, see how that works? Like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And that is done without any sort of magical stuff. So we've got custom scroll view, which is how you do this like stuff with slivers. I've done a sliver to box adapter, which is basically how you put render box children into slivers. That's how you do it. And that's why it says child and not sliver as the thing. And then I've got the sliver scroll reveal. And then here it is here. Now, this is a sliver scroll reveal. And again, this uses the box model. There's nothing magical going on here. So as you can see here, that is the entire layout. So we've got a slivered layout builder, which is essentially like a layout builder, but for slivers. And this gives you the sliver constraints. This is the constraints, just like you get box constraints on a box model, this gives you the sliver constraints. In this case, we get the cross-axis extent, which is in this case, because it's vertical, it's the width, and the remaining paint extent, which is the remaining paint visible on the screen. And then with some clever widgets underneath, we can use a clip rect to clip it, as you can see here, a transform to translate it based on the scroll offset. So when it gets to the top, this pushes it down. So actually, the beginning of this widget, as soon as it hits the top, the beginning of that widget, if I was to move this down here, this red widget actually is starting off the top of the display here, and what we're doing with offset here is moving it down, right? So it always stays on screen because scroll offset is how much our sliver is overlapped by the top of the screen here. And then we have this actual height, which is basically how high we want it to be. We won't go into that right now. And then overflow box allows us to let it overflow if it's smaller. and then we change the alignment axis. So if it's overflowing the top, it pins. In this case, as you can see here, it overflows. It's actually been clipped because the clip wrecked, but it aligns to the top. And when it's at the bottom, it overflows, but it does a bottom left alignment. So it's aligned to the bottom left. If I was to flip these around, you would get a very interesting behavior. I'm going to see that now. Now, when I scroll up, it looks like normal. When I get to the top, it just gets covered up.
Weird. So
we've changed that behavior, right, of reveal. But this is how, depends on how you want to use slivers to your advantage. But you can do all this kind of cool stuff, right? I'll post this before we end today. I'll post this on the gists and post the gist link, right? But I think let's answer the questioner from earlier who was talking about, what was it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I turned that off because we're done.
Yeah.
Just I'll find it. It's back here.
So yes, the code. I will post the code on the gist. That's what I just said. So that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Right here. There. I'll restart.
So A and B. If I scroll down, A is not visible. A should be removed now. So when I scroll back up again, I can only see B and C. So again, this is, as you can see with this, there's kind of varying sort of approaches you can have to this kind of sort of display of widgets. The thing that you're probably missing is very confusing, at least to a lot of people, is this sliver constraints. There's so many constraints. It's not just like, minimum height, minimum width, maximum width. There's a bunch of constraints, and these constraints can give you some cause for concern when you're first looking at this. So things like axis direction, that tells you if you're going horizontally or vertically, so you can change your sliver to behave differently. Growth direction, so if you're going from left to right or right to left or center out, there's all these different growth directions that you can do. User scroll direction, this is how it's currently been scrolled by the user. So you might be laying widgets out from the top but scrolling down, right? So you can suddenly start seeing that, just laying out slivers. There's a lot of potential of constraints that can change, right, as your inputs or your parameters to your sliver, right? So scroll offset, obviously we just said that's like essentially how much your widget has been scrolled off the screen, for want of a better word right now. Preceding scroll extent, what came before you in the entire scroll viewport. Overlap with the previous widget or the next widget, I forget which one it is, the next thing. Remaining pane extent, this is again what's remaining visibly. So this would be this to the bottom of the screen, what's visibly on the area of the widget on the screen. As a cross-axis extent and cross-axis direction, which would be the opposing direction to the axis direction. So if it's horizontal, it'd be vertical, horizontal, so on. Viewport main axis extent, so that's literally the viewport size, how big this viewport is. So you can see, given these values, you can do some really cool scrolling effects. If you know like the viewport size and how much you've overlapped, you can always keep like something pinned to the screen and all this kind of fun stuff, right? Remaining cache extent is essentially what I said. So this again, it revolves around the fact that when you have these widgets coming on the screen, it actually starts laying the widgets out off the screen so that when they come on, they are already preloaded and ready. That's the cache extent. The cache extent for a scrolling viewport it's essentially tall. In this case, because we're doing vertical, it's taller than the screen. And this tells you how much is remaining, also where the cache origin is, which can also be helpful in calculating these things out. If you're doing proper slivers, so right now I'm using Sliver Layout Builder here as an example because this allows us to kind of immediately, for want of a better word, get access to those constraints, but we can't affect those constraints, right? So the sliver to box adapter is like a get out clause because this says, we're going to go straight to render box model, and I'm using all of these other things to achieve the same effect. There's a more optimal way of achieving this effect by doing custom slivers, but that is hella complicated, and we're not going to go there right now. I'm not.
One of the things
maybe
while you're trying to figure something out here, one of the things you could do is actually put a couple of those values as text in the sliver that you're moving around. That might be interesting to observe. I don't know. Has anything changed that's interesting something about your collapsing box that might be worth seeing as text?
I know. Let's do that.
Curious. I mean, it's the kind of thing you probably can do in your sleep now. So. Okay. I recognize the word column. Okay.
I'm glad we're getting somewhere. Right. So
Yay! I know what a column is. I know what children is. I know what position fill. Okay.
We need. Let's just do it. Yeah. And here we can say. Let's something like. See how many we can get on the screen. So let's go.
Great.
This does give you that visual sort of. It's so much nicer when you can visually see these things.
Yeah, is that all going to be also in DevTools? Am I going to see all these numbers in DevTools for the constraints?
I have no idea.
Wow.
I've never actually looked. So I've never looked at it. To be honest, I just don't use the DevTools constraint. You mean
the layout builder? Yeah, and then it's got
this
like
thing down here. I mean,
it's got some readouts about different things when you do the. Well, you're saying this, but I don't know because I can't see. Oh, it's in your same window. Oh, sorry, I have a window that's blocking your window. No wonder I can't see it. But doesn't it have like a place where you see some numbers like
Layout Explorer?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there you go. So that Layout Explorer works, but as soon as you enter slivers,
it's not home anymore.
That's it. Look, I'm getting. Do I get anything?
Okay. Never mind then.
I don't think it works as slivers. I think it's crashing. I think that's the great crash screen.
We crashed DevTool on Humpday. We can do everything. That's right.
See.
Whoa, your editor is cool.
You can do this in VS Code.
Oh man. Oh, that's cool. Can you?
Yeah.
I still don't know how to use big pasty things with that. That's cool. Wow, look, numbers. Oh, it's already, and it's just needs to be blocked.
Yeah, because it's now, and we have a problem. It's the alignment, right? Because it's being overlapped.
Right.
Also, the black. Why do we have blackness? We should not have blackness. I guess I thought that should actually be it. I guess we'd push the fit down, which is what I thought we might have to do, but we'll see. Yeah. Okay, and then
you just center that.
No, what we'll do is we'll wrap it in and align. We'll have its alignment changed to the opposing direction as this. And this ensures that when it's on the bottom, it's aligned to the bottom, and when it's on the top, it's on the top.
Oh man, that's so smart.
So here we go. So when we're revealing, our direction is down, growth direction is forward, scroll direction reverse, because I was going up or down. You can see how that goes forward and reverse.
Oh wow.
Offset preceding amount. This is before our widget. That doesn't change. Can you make remaining pen extent? Sorry?
Can you make the text black?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to read the white on white stuff there.
Oh, my bad. It's also a bit small, but I don't think making it big would help. None doesn't. Although I could limit the numbers. Can I be bothered?
No, don't worry about that part. We can round off in our heads. Yeah, it's
to help.
Yeah, maybe. I like it. Ship it.
Let's Test in production.
Just like that to the customer. The customer, hey, look at this. We have a bonus. We have numbers that are meaningless to you in your scroll box.
Let's do two. I mean, we don't care about like more than 3 decimal digits of precision for our displays.
Yep, right. Yeah. It's not like we're doing the layout. It's doing the layout. It's just using these numbers. There we go.
So if I do that, then we can also go and set the font size.
I presume this is talking about the pasting trick here, and that trick again.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do that a lot. I've seen this before. You do that. It's cool. Oh, look. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Now just center them. No, right justify them. So that no, never mind. All right.
I don't think that'd help.
No, yeah, it's fine. This is fine. This is fun. This is already like really cool. Check that out. That's cool. Oh, you can put padding. Right.
I'm just embellishing here for no good reason, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right. Let's actually get to the point here, right? So as you can see here, our remaining pen extent expands, our cross axis remains the same, and our viewport height remains the same. So right now the paint extent is the one that's changing, and then once it goes on the screen,
the paint stays the same.
So the remaining paint extent, if you notice, is still growing because it's saying the remaining paint extent of the viewport is more. So when it goes to render this red view, it's actually saying, oh, you've got all this space remaining to you if you want to use it. So this is how you can have stuff like stretch or get smaller or whatever, right? And then when you hit the top here, there's our axis changed, and then you can see here's your scroll offset. Here's that getting smaller now.
Oh wow!
And remember, you can see here the remaining paint extent is the same as the viewport height right now, right? Now, if I didn't change the height, no, it would be maxed out at that. Yeah. There's a few different ways of handling this. Anyway, so that kind of gives you like some. I'll leave it on the example, but yeah.
Cool.
So the trick. So the thing I wanted to talk about. Let me see if I can get this open on the screen for everyone. I don't know. Is that big enough for everyone? I don't know. We'll try this. We'll see if this works. It's the first time for everything. So if we've got a sort of a viewport, and this is good, this is a vertical scrolling direction, and we've got like items that we're viewing. The problem here is 0, 0 being up here in this top corner means that if we want to hide this view, this one here at the top, from this is what the questioner, I can't remember his name, Lucas, was asking, then what happens is we now lose this number of pixels from the viewport, this kind of top area. And in doing so, essentially this becomes the 0 offset, right? So everything jumps up, right? Which is not what you want to do. So we kind of want to consume this amount of scrolling pixels, but not actually have it be displayed, right? So there are things like that you can do with slivers. So we can take a look at that. Another trick that so this I can pretty much guarantee. It's kind of complicated, but I kind of want to show this. So I call it warping. I don't know if there's another term used, but if you've got like a viewport and you've got like a large piece of media that you're kind of scrolling around on the view panel, essentially what you're doing is imagine that you're moving this outside box up and down, right? So you've got two ways of looking at this. You're moving the outside box down, almost like think of it like a bit of paper going through a printer, right? Is that a good example? I know, right? But to the viewer, that box is still on the outside, and so rather than the viewport moving, it's the paper that moves, right? So you can do this 2 different ways, if that kind of makes sense. So and this is kind of revolves around the notion of what you see on the screen is an illusion, right? Like there's never depth. There's never these 3 panels really in 3D, right? You have this notion of depth that doesn't actually exist on a computer screen because it's flat, right? So whenever you show to a user, it's really an illusion. So when it comes to this kind of scrolling behavior, what you actually want to do is once the user scrolls down a sort of a certain amount, you want to set a new center point. So if you were to say let's break this up into the 4 widgets. If the viewport gets moved down, and originally you were seeing this area, and you stop down here, let's say, then you can actually set up, I don't know, this widget now as 0.0, meaning that as long as you calculate the new scroll offset when you stop, visibly to the user, once they stop scrolling, it looks exactly the same. But the next frame is that you actually change the scroll offset, right? So what you've actually done is you've hidden the view above, but you've actually changed the initial scroll offset to now not incorporate that part of the UI, and they still feel like they've scrolled down the same amount. So there's no flicker, there's no movement, because the exact calculation is the same. But the end result is when they scroll back up, they stop because the view's not there anymore, and you've changed that offset that they can scroll down to.
What would that code look like? Or is that, I like what you're saying, but I'm just trying to figure out, imagine the sequence, because you're taking the item out of the list of things to be viewed. At the same time, you're also somehow computing all the offsets.
When we remove it, what we actually want to do is calculate where their delta is. So where from the offset 0 to where they should be on the viewport. You calculate that. It's the same as when you drag something around, right?
Okay.
I think if I can give this example, let's say when you drag something around on the screen, let's say you drag an icon around. When you touch, you're not dragging from 0, 0 of the icon. You're dragging from whatever the offset is of your touch to the 0, 0 of the icon. That's your delta. That's your difference. And essentially, You're doing the same thing here. When you scroll, you stop from the 0, 0 of the viewport down to wherever your starting widget is. That is. Show me all right, Randall. That's anyway. Let's see what we can do here. See if we can achieve this. So I'm gonna leave this in here, and I'm gonna leave this example alone. We're gonna start another example below this, and I'll ship it as one. Just that you have to toggle the 2 examples because I can't be bothered starting a new file project and things. So we'll do this as reveal app. And what should we call this this thing? Hide app? What do you want to call it? I don't know.
Naming is always tough. Thing. Lucas thing. Lucas thing. That's almost like thing. A movie play.
Lucas thing. Now, let's call this
I like Lucas thing.
I'm gonna call it hideout. I know.
Okay. I think Lucas should get credit for asking us this question that makes you think about this.
Hide Lucas
app. Lucas. Sorry, Lucas, we're gonna hide you now.
So right. So let's put a material app in here. Do we want to take anything from here? Probably not. I guess we'll use the same line piece. Not going to change, fill around with the scrolls. Yeah, this will be fine.
So Lucas, you're now famous. You're going to be in the code here for anybody that ever looks at this just in the future.
I'm going to be in the code forever.
Yes, it'll be on your permanent record.
When you want it to go away, it just won't. It'll stay there forever.
Good luck applying for any Flutter job in the future. They'll bring this up. I remember our research showed this day you didn't know how to do this.
Are you the Lucas from the Humpday Q&A show that we watched? Yes, I am. Right. So I guess I mean
we celebrities here.
Okay. I think we'll do. I guess we'll reuse the same kind of boxy things.
Yeah.
I think it's probably good to. Let's do something maybe like color in colors.primaries, and then.
Wait, that's a thing? I didn't know there was colors primaries.
Oh, now you know.
No, I know. doing this the hard way. Oh my
You've been
god.
doing it the hard way all this time. You didn't know.
Oh. I've charged my clients an extra 7 cents, probably 4 times now.
All right, let's see. We start. See what we get. Hey, look.
Oh, that's pretty. Oh my god, that's pretty. Oh, that's primaries. That's wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I like it.
Yeah, like the primary material ones, and there's accents as well.
Oh, accents.
Should we see what happens if we do? Let's show people how you do these new things.
Okay.
Let's do colors.accents.
Square brackets around that. Oh, you got them. They're really faint. Yeah, really faint square brackets. Oh, wow.
I don't know. I don't think it makes it any different. You can also do.
It's a little too many, I think. But okay, whatever.
I mean, this is. I mean, so to be clear, you can actually use sliver list, and there's some other. This is like. Yeah, it's just an explanation. I think. Yes, there is a computer color. Yeah, there's something else. I know. Do you know what? Let's just. We've got some colors here. I don't particularly like that. I like the darker ones.
Yeah, get rid of the action.
I'm going to flip these around, but I want more items, so that's fine.
Okay.
Right. So, what next? So let's say when we get to, we're going to need to identify one of these further down. So, shall we say our blue one? No, do we have which blue is this? Teal green. So that's teal. So that's cyan above. Should we say cyan? We're about middle. We'll drop the first, 3? Try something like that. So first things first, we're going to need to manage the state. So we'll convert to stateful. We're just going to do this, like, obviously we wouldn't do this at the app level. It's an example. I don't know how I have to say that, but
yep.
Do as I don't, do as I do as I say, something like that. Right. So we're gonna, let's take this out. Final. Yep. And then I guess we'll want a controller.
You need the scroll controller because you have to figure out what your current scroll position is.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, maybe I can change this, and I'm just having a thought. I'm just going to work this as I think. We'll see where we get to. So what I'm thinking is that we scroll down. When we scroll down to a certain trigger point. So the original question, I'm going to find it here, was, we'll bring this up on the screen, was we have a widget A, B, C. I scroll down and A is not on the screen. So however we want to determine that, there is ways of determining if something's on the screen or not. I don't particularly want to handle that right now with this. I'm just going to say when we get down to a certain point in here, then we're going to remove, right? Which is essentially the same thing. When it's not visible on the screen, we want to remove it. When I scroll up again, I can only see B and C left. There's issues making this smooth, which is what we're trying to address.
Yep.
So sliver to box adapter, multiple colors, great. We're here. When we scroll down, we want to monitor that. So, init state. We want to, I mean, obviously we could, there's a bunch of ways of doing this. We could use scroll notification events. Maybe we should just do that for a change. I don't know. This works. I'm here now. So we do something like on scroll change. I kind of want to almost, I won't do. I can't. So here now we want to say offset. It's going to be controller clients. Then it's, I don't even need to do that anymore. You used to have to do it actually. Hang on. I think it's, can you ask for offset without clients? I'm not sure if you can. I think has pixels. So you do has pixels and then get pixels, which kind of seems counterintuitive that you have offset here. It should do it here. Maybe I should submit a PR. Yeah, there's a first PR for anyone. This should say position has pixels and then default it to like min extent or max extent and have that as a parameter or something. Right, so it has clients. Then you can do controller dot position dot has. I'm gonna do this because I don't want it to break. But, if that's both true, then I should be able to get the control. I feel like this is something that I feel maybe I'm doing this wrong. I don't know, but from what I can remember, this is what you do. Right, let's print that. And see the log, I guess. Let's see what we get. All right, so let's attach that controller to our scroll view. And I scroll. Yeah, and we get stuff. Now, there's things like we're working out, like, is the cyan one visible on the screen, for example? We're just saying that. And the answer here is we could do something like, we're triggering with something off the screen, so we're going to trigger based on a pixel scroll offset. And once it's triggered, we don't want it to trigger again. So we're going to this is going to be very much an example. But if I was to maybe do this, you could do things like actually have events and triggers and maybe even have it so that it's the blue one that controls and reports. You could even wrap the item when it's the blue item in something that reports the state to be triggered when it's visible, when it's not visible. Because any widget, to be clear, any widget that's inside a scrolling piece of content, I feel like I should probably just show this now, but let's say I put a builder in here. How best to do this? Let's do if colors dot blue, then I want to report back a sliver to box. And the reason why I haven't, by the way, you can actually, to be clear, just because item is a stateless widget, it can also just put a sliver to box adapter in here. Then all items are slivers. You can call this sliver item. Just because it's a stateless widget doesn't make it a sliver. Because it's done at the render object level, which means that it doesn't matter that this is a widget or this uses an element, because it has no, because all composed widgets, composed, what they call component elements, don't have render objects. Any stateful widget, inherited widget, do not contribute to the render tree, which means that you can actually slivers and also inherited parent data and things like that cross the boundaries without any problem. So you can actually, I could call this sliver item. This is, it's by convention, so you know it's a sliver. And then this can return back sliver to box adapter. And then in our code, wherever we have an item, we don't even need that. We can just remove that, right? And do this. And that works.
Nice. And
just to be clear to everyone, but the reason why I don't do that is because I reuse the item. Actually, we could do this. Like there is, actually, let's do this. Why not? Let's call this, let me go back. Just because we'll call this box item. And then we could do a,
the box protocol is a subset of the sliver protocol, right?
No. So both box, render box and render sliver are both render objects. They're two separate protocols. And then that's why the adapters are used. The adapters allow you to combine them. There's one. The other way is multi-sliver adapter, which is basically what's underneath. That's literally what a custom scroll view is underneath. Anyway, right. So sliver item color. And then here I could just return back a box item. I mean, this seems obvious to people, but I'm just saying that this is how you might do this. Again,
I'm sure it's not obvious to everybody that's watching this right now. I can guarantee you it's not obvious to everybody.
Anyway, so here we've converted, essentially made a sliver item, which is the same as a box item, but is a sliver, right? Because of the adapter, right? And now we can actually even wrap this in a sliver padding, right? And any other slivers that we want to. And then this engine sets symmetric horizontal 12. We should see a difference then. So we can see the difference between these and the other ones. And this is a child, that's a sliver. But this is the difference. The child of sliver padding is a sliver because it carries the sliver protocol down, whereas the child of a sliver to box adapter is a child parameter that denotes it's a box child. Just to be clear. Anyway, so now up here in our reveal app, where we were using this, there you go. Yeah. These can all be now sliver item. And as you can see by this here, we use a sliver scroll reveal with a box item inside it. That's why I needed to have it not be on the outside, right? So I could reuse it. But anyway, again, we could have slivers all the way down and do some other things, but this works. And now when it comes down to what we were doing, if we come back to that sliver to box step down here, this can now be a sliver item as well. Got that right. Else. So when it's color blue, we could do a sliver to box adapter. And in this case, we can have a child. I'm just going to put this in here, right? See. Works. Builder, return back a box item with the color. What's really interesting about this is this builder can now have a. I mentioned you pull this out into an actual widget, right? Like notification widget or something. So you can be scrollable of context. And this is essentially the scrollable state widget and the scrollable state of the underlying sliver render list, basically. And it's called a
Wouldn't it be the same? Wouldn't it be the same scroll controller that you passed into that list?
It doesn't give you a scroll controller. However, from the scrollable state, you can get that. So what you actually get is I think it's called scrolling context. Hang on, where is it?
Okay, right. The one that has
this is scroll context. So you get back scrollable state, and from scrollable state, you get what's called a scroll context, and that gives you the storage context, the vsync, a bunch of other things, and part of this is able to get the scroll position as well, right? So that's kind of interesting. No points at drag, semantic scroll. So from position is funny enough, the position in it.
That's the distance from the absolute 0, right?
Sure. But I just want to be clear about this. A scroll controller can have multiple positions because it may be attached to multiple things, although it shouldn't be. It's only attached to multiple things because one scroll controller can be moved between multiple widgets, so you can reuse it. I won't go into the details, but the point here is scroll position is essentially what that scroll controller is currently controlling, which it happens to be a viewport offset. Viewport offset is how a sliver render layout essentially is what's called a viewport. If people don't know, I could probably find the thing somewhere. I've lost me screen. Oh, here it is over here. The widget the underlying widget that does all the rendering for scrolling content is called a viewport. A widget that is bigger on the inside.
Yeah, somebody's having.
And here you go. See also list view, sliver to box adapter, all the stuff I'm talking about. And there it is there. Multi-child render object widget and nested scroll viewport. Ooh, that's interesting. Have they improved this, or am I thinking about something else?
They've been getting better stuff out.
I need to have a take a look at that. Anyway, no, I think it's the same. I think I'm probably just forgetting something. Right, if I go back. Anyway, so a viewport, and then inside this is where it actually does the rendering, and this is where you get that viewport offset. Anyway, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Let's go back to where we were. So this is where it actually stores the pixels. And this allows you to correct the scroll offset and apply different content dimensions. And this is how scrolling works. I won't go into it right now. The key here is back to our stuff. Back to where we were. All the way back. Here, we do scrollable of to get that. And then from here, you can get the current pixel offset. We can also say where we are in the scroll view versus where our context is in the viewport versus the parent. And then from that, we can then deduce, like, are we off the screen? Now, I'm not going to, I'll leave this in here because it's kind of interesting, and I'll print something here. So annoying because it's like they're going to throw because it's not attached probably. And let's see. So there's your scrollable, and then when it scrolls, hang on, wait for it. Why didn't that? It's making me a liar. Because I have to register a listenable on the position. Does it? I forget. Yeah, this is a change notifier, and you listen to it. But anyway, do you know what? I can't be bothered right now. Can I? Why not? I'm just going to show you. We'll get back to what we actually came here for. So
how many tools we remove from your toolbox before the work is done?
I know, right? So this in this case could be what was the saying? And then it's like that. Try that again. So there's our scrollable 0. And when I scroll, you'll see the scrollable is reporting as well as the outside view, my listener. So that's how you can, like, that's the difference between listening internally inside the screw, inside the viewport. Obviously, you could just do this in a init stay and then add listener and remove listener and do whatever you want. Or you could take a controller and listen down to the scrolling stuff. But anyway, I'm going to comment that out. It's just an example. I'm going to, not important to what we're trying to actually achieve. So,
okay.
We want a flag to say we've hidden equals false.
Train of thought must have got here late because he's saying, "What are you guys building?" We know.
Yeah, that's the question.
We're building that train.
So if we're currently not hidden, and we want to say now we're hidden, so this is like a trigger, and then we can inside here we can also say if it's not hidden and our offset to then was it about 1500. Again, I'm just hacking together loads of time.
Yep.
So this idea here is that once it triggers, because the Boolean, it won't trigger again, and we can mask that way into some logic and make a little class. You can do whatever you want. So now we do this. We can say trigger. Let's do this. Trigger. See what happens. So
whatever we can accomplish in another 8 minutes, because I have a hard out. So
yeah, just going really quick on this. So we're going to scroll down to the point where this is going to trigger. There you go. Right. So when we trigger to this point, we're saying that we want to get rid of maybe the first 2-3 widgets. Right. So if hidden is true, what we can say is, well, actually, now we get to do some other if conditions in here. So not ideal. This is not the most ideal way of doing this, but it works. So we can say this index color. This is now using the new records.
Why not just skip 3?
That's what. Well, that's what I'm going to say. If hidden and I would see what you're saying, like in actual, yeah.
The item dot skip 3 when it's needed.
It's hidden 3.
Yeah, like that. There we go. Yeah, or 0. Right. See, much simpler than what you were about to go do. So
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Right. So what we should see now is when I scroll down, I get to the blue section. When the blue section gets to the top, we're actually going to get so there's our blue section because it's not a sliver thing. And when it gets somewhere around here, oh look, when I scroll back up, did that work? Did that work without any special stuff? It probably did.
Really? Did it work? Oh my God! Did it?
I don't know.
It didn't
I
didn't see it.
No. It didn't. Because sorry, that's me. I was going to say that shouldn't have worked. I'm like, what did I do right? This is what we didn't do. All right,
set state time. Set state.
So it wasn't rebuilding. So okay. So we scroll down, and hopefully, there you go. That's see. They look like they changed color, but what actually happened was the scrolling list jumped up 3 items.
Right.
Showing us green, and if I scroll back up, those first 2, the pink and was it the orange one, have gone. Right.
Yeah.
So if I now restart, we should get back those initial ones. There they are.
Mm-hmm.
So the key here is how do we stop that jump from taking place? How do we hide stuff but not have it do the jump? Okay. So let's get back to that. So we get down to here and I don't know what scroll position I'm triggering on this right now. I think let's do 40. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So when the large blue block gets to the top or thereabouts, we're gonna get it triggered, right? So how do we deal with this? The point here is we want to calculate what is the number of pixels that is actually visible on the screen for those items that we're removing, right? So ideally, what we could do, I mean, I don't mind doing this right now. What we can do is put a key on every item, right? So we're going to put a key here. And then you can then access the actual rendered height. Another thing is that because we're calculating the number of pixels and we're actually doing that, that's the number of pixels that we're actually removing. Sorry, no, it's not. Ignore me. No, let's just calculate with keys. Let's do it with keys. That's the proper way of doing it. There's nicer ways to abstract this. I'm not going to go into it right now. I'm happy to talk about another time. But let's do, so we're going to do a list.generate. Let's do a length final keys. List.generate length is going to be items.length. And it's going to be global key. We don't care about, we could put a debug label in there, but we don't actually care about the what widget it's for, because we know that it's a sliver or a render list or whatever, right?
We don't care when it breaks. We'll need to know, but we're not going to break anything.
I've done this a really interesting way. I'm actually going to try and get this from. Let me think a second. This is going to be interesting. Oh well, no. No, this will get the render object. Now this should be fine. So slivers, and then this will be index. Okay, now this is not right because no, it's fine. The keys adjust after the fact. So as long as we have an index, though, let's do this. Back to where we were. We'll do index. Yeah. Right. All right. So now we've got each of the items is going to get given a key, and when we go to hide, we know that we're hiding the first 3. This is a bit lame and all over the place, but the principle is the same. I think this is maybe a good video for you, Randall, to maybe do a nicer example on this, but limited on time. So anyway, so keys dot. So we want to go loop. Essentially, we want to do a loop, and we want to work out the calculated height. I'm just going to quickly go through the first 3 keys.
You could do items dot take 3.
Add
them together. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. keys.take3.
I guess
That's just
Sure.
the 3 items.
Whatever.
Oh, fold with or some reduce with plus.
Well, actually, yeah, we could do that. This is what I'm trying to say. I just want to keep it simple, like that. I'm not going
Yeah.
This is,
Okay. Sorry,
there's a nicer functional way of doing this, but let's just
yeah, you did the easy way there.
Get that in size.
That height, right?
The size of the render box returned by find. Oh, that's only if it's a render box, though. And this is what I was going to say. I think what I actually need to do here. This is what I was going to say. If it's on a since we're on slivers now and not render objects, it's kind of like slightly more complicated. But let's just see. As render sliver. Let's see. So we should have. I'm trying to remember what comes out. It's geometry. That's the one. Geometry, and then we get our paint extent.
While you're working that out, I just want to thank everybody for stopping by today, and glad you got your questions answered. Simon's going to finish this up. If I have to go before that, Simon's finishing this up, and I'll be back next week, and we'll have a good time again. And thanks everybody for stopping by. Please share this with your friends. We need more live people on the stream so we can get a variety of questions. But the questions were great today. So, and obviously this is leading to a pretty interesting demonstration, which I'll have to watch on the replay, but I got to be out of here. So enjoy, Simon.
Hang off. All right, man. Yeah, I'm going to finish this off. Right, let's see if we can get this calculated height. Why am I getting an error I? Sure. All right, so let's see trigger height. This should. What was that? Right. Why do I have an underscore? We can also calculate all of this before we change the state. So it's not that makes that much difference in what we're doing right now, but it's good enough. Right. So trigger. Did they trigger? Oh, we already triggered. I have a feeling that those widgets might not. Yeah, because they're not visible, but they do have a layout extent. This is what we have. Fun with slivers. Fun with slivers. Let's try again. No. Oh. Look at that at the end. There we go. 850.909090909090 pixels. Yeah. Okay. So essentially, what we want to do is to stop that from jumping. We need to adjust the scroll negative this amount. That's it. So when we say hidden true, we also want to say controller dot move to. Is it move to animate to? There's offset. Correct. Negative. I have this the right way or the wrong way. We'll find out. Let's see. So we scroll. Hey, look. It worked. And when I scroll back up, they're gone. There you go. That's it. that's the magic. Yeah. So let me just go for it again. It literally does nothing, but that's what we wanted to do, right? So the idea here is that, let me just be clear. We scroll down, and when this blue widget hits the top, without this line in there, in fact, I'll show you again, without this line in there, let's hit save. No, great. So now when it hits the top, it changes, right? Because we removed those widgets and it scrolled down. Now what we want to do, if I hot reload again, we get to that point. This time I'll comment this line in. And when we get down to the point, let's start again, sorry. And we get down to that point, it does not jump. So what we've actually just done is we remove these widgets from the scroll view, and then we adjust our scroll position so that they, like, as if they didn't exist there in the first place when we scrolled down. And that's the illusion I was talking about earlier, right? So this is this notion that what you're seeing, what you're seeing is not, you know, what is actually presented to the user, right? Like there's a difference in those two things. Right. Let's see. I will post this code. It's pretty jank, but I guess it explains it. I'll post it with the reveal as the primary, which makes for a slightly better example. Right. So that was about this question, by the way, if people want to know, that's how we do it. Let me just pop this in a gist. If people bear with me 1 second, and then I'll post the gist link live on the stream here, and then it's done. I need the MIT license 23. Go for it. Let's see. I've just. New public gist code, and we're calling it magic. The magic. During May, what's this date? May 19th, July 2023. Right, let's make it public. I don't know, wait. It always makes a secret just first. All right. Let's post that live in the chat here. And there's the link. So you can all go grab the code and have a play around with it. Just curious, what is the use case for this train of thought? That would be Lucas's thing. So the thing is with slivers, right? So there's several aspects of the way that when you scroll down. I'll give you an example of this. A good example of this kind of thing, we spoke about this last week, is think about Twitter as like a news feed. New items are coming in at the top, right? But your scroll position remains the same. You still look at the same item. You don't have items coming in and then keep getting moved down. So you have to keep scrolling back up to keep that item in view, right? You're fighting against the scroll. The idea here is that as new stuff comes in, yours still remains the same position on the scroll. It works slightly different to this example. This is kind of an example in the sense of the way that a news feed would work is everything is virtual, right? So I tried to explain this earlier, but it's the notion of in your mind, when you look at something that you're scrolling, what you're moving is like a sheet of paper up and down. So you're bringing something into view, right? When you're working with an infinite list, you're changing your viewport, but the paper remains the same. So this way, you're essentially revealing more information, but actually it stays the same. So this is kind of like this notion that is infinite in size, but you never get to see the ends, right? I don't know if that kind of helps. It's again, I feel like I need a graphics artist, someone that can like draw things for me, so I can explain some of these complex things. Maybe put together a package like newsfeed or something that kind of does this kind of behavior. Another example of when it's important to like. So here's just briefly, we're talking about scrolling here. When you a good example of something that you kind of want to do is like scroll down to you want to scroll down to a particular piece of data in your view. So imagine that, we'll say Twitter, for example, you've got a deep link to like a tweet that happened 5 days ago, right? So it takes you in and maybe it scrolls you down to highlight, and Twitter doesn't do this, but scrolls you down this huge list to highlight that item. And then you get the items before and after in timeline or something, right? The problem with scrolling down that far, right, is that first of all, if you did animate 2 on a scroll view, you would need to know at what position you stop, right? So now what you're going to have to do is, if you're to do this the sort of the simple way, then what you're going to end up doing is scrolling down and seeing, is my data now visible? Is my data now visible? Maybe keep scrolling at a constant speed until you find it. I mean, imagine how, like, at some point you're going to be like, well, it might be up a month ago that they got this tweet. Maybe they just got the message. I don't know, right? You can't scroll down a month's worth of tweet. And why are you laying out all those things? Why are you downloading all those images, right? Just see, like, this becomes detrimental, but you still want that effect. So from a visual standpoint and versus a data standpoint, like, the data is fine. It doesn't matter that it was a month ago. It's instantly there. But from a visual standpoint, you need to scroll them down. So what you do is you're essentially saying, okay, the place that I want to view is my 0 point. This is just conceptually, right? So that way I'm starting at negative 200. And when the app opens up, you can just scroll down 200 and there it is, right? And you're scrolling from a negative to the 0 point, and then you've got positive scrolling down, because it doesn't matter. 0 doesn't have to be that. This is your reference. It's just a reference point, right? So I think, what was I even getting at? Yeah, like scrolling down. So something that you can do is called, I think I've referred to it as warping, which is this notion of, if it's not visible on the screen, you scroll the list really quickly, and then you basically say, oh, wherever I am, that's like my 0 point, and I start rendering the data, the widgets from that point. So what the user sees is kind of like this, like, quick scroll. Maybe this actually happens, right? So you scroll down with your finger, and then essentially you get to a velocity, or you do a scroll. What's called you start an activity on the scroll. You can actually just create a scroll activity and say on position of the controller, you can say start activity. But you can actually start an activity with a velocity, and once it completes, you can actually get notice of that and then re-render the screen. To the user, they see like a blur, and then that's it. They're there, their item, right? You haven't had to lay out 200 items. You haven't had to lay out months worth of data. You haven't had to download lots of pictures. So again, it's all about illusion, right? It's all about, like, tricking the user's behavior. I mean, you can imagine that you keep scrolling. I mean, a good example of this is, think of a carousel, which is the notion of those kind of things that go across the screen, right? Like in a carousel, it comes from the, like, what are they called? Circuses or parks or whatever, right? You have something that, like, the horses that go round, right? Fake horses, you know what I mean? I don't know, carousel. Anyway, it keeps turning and turning forever, right? So you can actually do like a 3-dimensional carousel with items, and it keeps moving around. But a vertical scroll that's 2-dimensional is essentially the same thing. You can keep scrolling, and for the user, they can keep repeating the same item, but they keep scrolling down, right? Because the notion of scrolling down is a virtual thing, and what you're displaying is just reference to whatever 0 point you want. I don't know. It's worth playing around with, like, what you display based on what the scroll offset is, because you can get some really neat effects like we just had here. So what we're doing here is essentially the same thing. We scroll down. When we hide some stuff, we change the scroll offset, but we're displaying the same widgets we were doing when we were further down the page. Thus, they think there's no difference, but actually the widgets disappeared that were above. All right, that's enough talking, because I can talk forever. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope the live coding was helpful and people learned a lot. The gist is up there on the screen, and I'll be back same time next week, I guess. Thanks for joining us. Bye.